Joins computer audio, video, share, full screen, optimize for video, share sound.
One in 5 teens think about suicide. Suicide is the leading cause of death among Ohioans ages 10 to 14 and the second leading cause of death among Ohioans ages 15 to 34 and has increased by 60% over the past decade. 1 in 3 homes with children have a gun. Children as young as 3 can be strong enough to pull a 10-pound trigger. 85% of bicycle-related head injuries can be prevented with a helmet. 1 in 3 of Ohio's children are considered overweight or obese. Nearly 40% of high school seniors admitted to vaping at least once. 40% of Ohio's children are exposed to smoke at home, which can cause illness and even death. Only 66% of Ohio babies have received all recommended immunizations. Only 40% of Ohio's Medicaid children get the 2 required lead screenings. The COVID-19 pandemic has led to a significant drop in well-care visits, which are crucial to monitoring growth and development and protecting against vaccine-preventable diseases. In fact, vaccines are down as much as 73%. But thanks to the Ohio AAP, there are pediatricians working hard every day to help change these pictures. The Store It Safe Learning Collaborative will provide safety counseling, depression screening, and locked boxes to 1,000 families, along with resources to be spread throughout the state of Ohio over the next year. The Put a Lid on It program has donated 65,000 free helmets to children across Ohio over the past decade. 84,000 children have benefited from our Parenting at Mealtime and Playtime programs, nutrition, and play materials. Through our regional vaping trainings and education, we have reached 500,000 teens with vaping prevention materials. Our Smoke-Free Families program reduced in-home smoke exposure by 47%. The Brush Book Bed program provided more than 4,000 young children with books. Ohio AAP immunization programs build coalitions and statewide partnerships to advocate for immunizations and address parental refusal to increase rates. The Childhood Lead Prevention Program is offering regional education and providing resources to increase lead testing for children in high-risk zip codes and those on Medicaid. Ohio AAP has been working to preserve and protect pediatrics during the COVID-19 pandemic by providing up-to-date news, information, and resources to our members and the families they serve.
The Ohio AAP educates, innovates, and advocates for all Ohio pediatricians to directly impact nearly 1 million children and their families each year. The Ohio AAP has more than 2,900 members and growing. The Ohio AAP advocates for children at the community and state level, educates by providing tangible and digital resources for pediatricians, families, and partners, engages pediatricians and partners in a collaborative network, guides pediatricians and families through trusted information on emergent pediatric issues, improves practice performance through enhanced reimbursement, transforms practices with evidence-based quality improvement and outcomes.
Thank you, Ohio AAP, for helping pediatricians so that they can help kids like me grow and achieve our dreams. 1 in 5 teens think about suicide. Suicide is the leading cause of death among Ohioans ages 10 to 14 and the second leading cause of death among Ohioans ages 15 to 34 and has increased by 60% over the past decade. 1 in 3 homes with children have a gun. Children as young as 3 can be strong enough to pull a 10-pound trigger. 85% of bicycle-related head injuries can be prevented with a helmet. 1 in 3 of Ohio's children are considered overweight or obese. Nearly 40% of high school seniors admitted to vaping at least once. 40% of Ohio's children are exposed to smoke at home, which can cause illness and even death. Only 66% of Ohio babies have received all recommended immunizations. Only 40% of Ohio's Medicaid children get the 2 required lead screenings. The COVID-19 pandemic has led to a significant drop in well care visits, which are crucial to monitoring growth and development and protecting against vaccine-preventable diseases. In fact, vaccines are down as much as 73%. But thanks to the Ohio AAP, there are pediatricians working hard every day to help change these pictures. The Stuart Safe Learning Collaborative will provide safety counseling, depression screening, and locked boxes to 1,000 families, along with resources to be spread throughout the state of Ohio over the next year. The Put a Lid on It program has donated 65,000 free helmets to children across Ohio over the past decade. 84,000 children have benefited from our Parenting at Mealtime and Playtime programs, nutrition, and play materials. Through our regional vaping trainings and education, we have reached 500,000 teens with vaping prevention materials. Our Smoke-Free Families program reduced in-home smoke exposure by 47%. The Brush Book Bed program provided more than 4,000 young children with books. Ohio AAP immunization programs build coalitions and statewide partnerships to advocate for immunizations and address parental refusal to increase rates. The Childhood Lead Prevention Program is offering regional education and providing resources to increase lead testing for children in high-risk zip codes and those on Medicaid. Ohio AAP has been working to preserve and protect pediatrics during the COVID-19 pandemic by providing up-to-date news, information, and resources to our members and the families they serve.
The Ohio AAP educates, innovates, and advocates for all Ohio pediatricians to directly impact nearly 1 million children and their families each year. The Ohio AAP has more than 2,900 members and growing. The Ohio AAP advocates for children at the community and state level, educates by providing tangible and digital resources for pediatricians, families, and partners, engages pediatricians and partners in a collaborative network, guides pediatricians and families through trusted information on emergent pediatric issues, improves practice performance through enhanced reimbursement, transforms practices with evidence-based quality improvement and outcomes.
Thank you, Ohio AAP, for helping pediatricians so that they can help kids like me grow and achieve our dreams. One in 5 teens think about suicide. Suicide is the leading cause of death among Ohioans ages 10 to 14 and the second leading cause of death among Ohioans ages 15 to 34 and has increased by 60% over the past decade. 1 in 3 homes with children have a gun. Children as young as 3 can be strong enough to pull a 10-pound trigger. 85% of bicycle-related head injuries can be prevented with a helmet. 1 in 3 of Ohio's children are considered overweight or obese. Nearly 40% of high school seniors admitted to vaping at least once. 40% of Ohio's children are exposed to smoke at home, which can cause illness and even death. Only 66% of Ohio babies have received all recommended immunizations. Only 40% of Ohio's Medicaid children get the 2 required lead screenings. The COVID-19 pandemic has led to a significant drop in WellCare visits, which are crucial to monitoring growth and development and protecting against vaccine-preventable diseases. In fact, vaccines are down as much as 73%. But thanks to the Ohio AAP, there are pediatricians working hard every day to help change these pictures. The Stuart Safe Learning Collaborative will provide safety counseling, depression screening, and locked boxes to 1,000 families, along with resources to be spread throughout the state of Ohio over the next year. The Put a Lid on It program has donated 65,000 free helmets to children across Ohio over the past decade. 84,000 children have benefited from our Parenting at Mealtime and Playtime programs, nutrition, and play materials. Through our regional vaping trainings and education, we have reached 500,000 teens with vaping prevention materials. Our Smoke-Free Families program reduced in-home smoke exposure by 47%. The Brush Book Bed program provided more than 4,000 young children with books. Ohio AAP immunization programs build coalitions and statewide partnerships to advocate for immunizations and address parental refusal to increase rates. The Childhood Lead Prevention Program is offering regional education and providing resources to increase lead testing for children in high-risk zip codes and those on Medicaid. Ohio AAP has been working to preserve and protect pediatrics during the COVID-19 pandemic by providing up-to-date news, information, and resources to our members and the families they serve.
The Ohio AAP educates, innovates, and advocates for all Ohio pediatricians to directly impact nearly 1 million children and their families each year. The Ohio AAP has more than 2,900 members and growing. The Ohio AAP advocates for children at the community and state level, educates by providing tangible and digital resources for pediatricians, families, and partners, engages pediatricians and partners in a collaborative network, guides pediatricians and families through trusted information on emergent pediatric issues, improves practice performance through enhanced reimbursement, transforms practices with evidence-based quality improvement and outcomes.
Thank you, Ohio AAP, for helping pediatricians so that they can help kids like me grow and achieve our dreams. One in 5 teens think about suicide. Suicide is the leading cause of death among Ohioans ages 10 to 14 and the second leading cause of death among Ohioans ages 15 to 34 and has increased by 60% over the past decade. 1 in 3 homes with children have a gun. Children as young as 3 can be strong enough to pull a 10-pound trigger. 85% of bicycle-related head injuries can be prevented with a helmet. 1 in 5 teens think of
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Ohio AAP Spring Education Meeting. We have a great afternoon of some educational sessions planned for you this afternoon. Want to welcome everybody. Happy Friday. And before we begin, we're going to do a little chat box icebreaker. Unfortunately, good news is we have right now over 100 participants logged in, so we can't have everybody introduce themselves, but want you to enter in the chat box the color that best describes your mood today. So the color that best describes your current mood. All right. We got quite the rainbow popping up. All right. Well, again, welcome to our virtual spring education meeting. My name is Dr. Chris Peltier, and I'm president-elect of the Ohio chapter, American Academy of Pediatrics. The Ohio AAP is a statewide organization that promotes the health, safety, and well-being of children and adolescents so they can achieve their dreams. With membership of almost 3,000 Ohio pediatricians and residents, Ohio AAP is the state's strongest network of education and advocacy professionals that are focused on pediatrics. In 2020, Ohio AAP members impacted more than 1 million children through quality improvement programs in education. And their awareness campaigns reach more than 174 million people across the country. Many pediatric advocates, providers, and our families rely on Ohio AAP's educational tools and resources. Ohio AAP has also been working hard to support pediatricians and continue to preserve and protect pediatrics throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. Through our hashtag, SafePeds, Healthy Kids social media campaign and office remobilization toolkit. This toolkit and dedicated COVID-19 webinars, virtual education and meetings, podcasts, and 24/7 advocacy with Governor DeWine and the Ohio Department of Health. Through all of these programs and opportunities, we've aimed to be a constant advocate and source of information to our members, our partners, and our families. We're looking forward to being safely back together in person for our 2021 annual meeting that's currently scheduled for October 29th to 30th at the Hilton Polaris. Stay tuned for registration details and topics at the end of next month. We also wanted to thank the nearly 400 of you that have registered, and so far we're up to 125 that have joined us today from across Ohio. We have a really broad range of professional disciplines. We have pediatricians, nurses, public health professionals, allied health professionals, educators, administrators, counselors, community organizations, caseworkers, community health workers, law enforcement, and so many more professionals and teen health advocates that have joined us today. Now, just a few housekeeping items as we get started. You are all joining in listen-only mode. This will help reduce background noise as we are also recording the session. If you have comments or questions during the sessions, please use the chat box. Ohio AAP staff and our speakers will monitor the chat box throughout the sessions and will be adding responses, comments, and answering questions throughout their sessions. We will plan on sending a follow-up email with a question and answer summary and a link to evaluations for you to receive CME or MOC Part 2 credit and or your participation certificates. I know, it's backwards, see? There we go. All right, there we go. So want to support the Put a Lid on It bike helmet safety program and have a chance at winning a raffle prize? Even if you can't attend an event, our Goofy Golf raffle tickets that's going to take place on May 14th, raffle tickets are open to everyone. And we're going to put a link to that in the chat box. As many of you know, May is Bike Helmet Safety Awareness Month, and every $5 donation purchases a helmet for an Ohio child. You can help us reach our goal by donating now. And again, we're going to put that link in the chat box for you. Our first topic is very timely and an initiative that the Ohio AAP has prioritized for the last several years. With the dramatic rise in depression, anxiety, and suicide due to COVID-19, it's more important than ever to share a unified, impactful message of prevention to teens and families in crisis. Our first two speakers are Dr. Sarah Denny and Dr. Mike Gittleman, who will share details about our Store It Safe program and teen suicide prevention. Dr. Gittleman is a pediatric emergency room physician at Cincinnati Children's Hospital and a professor of clinical pediatrics at the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine. Within the Ohio AAP, he has developed a statewide bicycle helmet intervention, a gun safety program, a hospital-based safe sleep and office-based inquiry QI program. His area of research expertise has been studied to the impact of screening and counseling families about injury risk in the office and ED setting to provide future injuries. And he has published his outcomes extensively in peer-reviewed journals. Dr. Sarah Denny is an attending physician in the Division of Pediatric Primary Care at Nationwide Children's Hospital and is Associate Clinical Professor of Pediatrics at The Ohio State University School of Medicine. She is co-chair of the Injury Prevention Committee for the Ohio AAP. Dr. Denny is co-director for Resident Advocacy Education at Nationwide Children's Hospital and enjoys teaching pediatric residents how pediatricians can effectively advocate for the needs of their patients. Dr. Denny sits on the board of directors for the Ohio AAP and is the co-chair of the advocacy committee. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Gittleman, who's going to kick us off.
Chair switch. I am really delighted to get to speak with everyone today about our Steward Safe program. Next slide. Sarah and I have really no financial relationships to disclose. Next slide. So today, I'm going to spend maybe 10, 15 minutes talking about kind of the epidemiology of firearm injuries in the United States, understand kind of why pediatricians should really talk about safe storage. Sarah's going to talk a little bit about an overview of our Steward Safe program. And then Emily Harris is going to come in and talk a little bit about kind of the practicality of this is the program, this is why we have it, and then how do you actually implement it into daily practice? And Emily's going to talk more about that, and that's going to be our entire session for today. Next slide. So I wanted to start today with two cases, and unfortunately, both of these cases are cases that happened. They've happened within the last 8 years, and they've happened in different places around this country. So this first case was a 15-year-old boy who presented to their primary care provider for a well child check. They actually presented because they wanted their sports physical to be completed. While they were there, the pediatrician went over their anticipatory guidance that they had listed. One was the child was actually a football player. They were a lineman, so they were overweight. So the pediatrician talked a little bit about obesity. They talked about sports readiness, and they talked about driving safety. And then they put a HEADS assessment into place, and they talked about like home education activities, drugs, and sex, which most adolescent doctors and primary care providers know about the HEADS program. Unfortunately, there was no mention about home firearms. There was no mention about lethal means storage, and there was no discussion about recent stressors or coping skills. Next slide. 3 days later, EMS presented to a home because there were gunshots fired. A 15-year-old boy was found dead with a single gunshot wound to his head, and he was pronounced dead upon arrival to the emergency room. Next slide. So one lesson to learn is that the family had a firearm stored in the nightstand next to the parents' bed. The teen just broke up with their girlfriend that evening. The teen was known to be impulsive. He was called a hothead. And although HEADS kind of uncovered that he was having some problems with his grades, they didn't uncover that he was in a volatile relationship, that he was incredibly impulsive, that there was a firearm within access to him. All right, next slide. The next case happened in the Chicago area where there were two boys. Their names were Chris and John. They were best friends. John and Chris wanted to do something after school. So John went over to Chris's house, and Chris's mom, Chris called his mom and said, "Mom, John's over here." And Chris's mom said, "You know what? We really don't like it when kids are in the house and we're not home. I'd prefer if you didn't have a friend over." So what do you think Chris and John did? Well, they went to John's house because John's mom really didn't care that there were kids in the house. John then went into the closet and he found his dad's gun. And he was like, "Check this out." And he starts waving it around. He then cocks the gun and he then points it. And Chris is like, I don't feel comfortable. This isn't right. I don't want to do this. And then John removes the magazine out of the base of the gun, thinking that all the bullets were out. He points and shoots at Chris and hits Chris in the chest and kills him. What John didn't know was that when he cocked the gun, a bullet went into the chamber. And so although he removed the ammunition, it really didn't matter because there was already a bullet in the chamber and another child was killed. Next slide. So I wanted to start this because unfortunately, these are real life scenarios. These are things that happen every day in the United States. And we sit there and we forget about this as a problem. So I wanted to start by saying, what do you think are the two leading causes of teen deaths? And you can just check on the boxes. We'll give you a couple seconds. All right. Should we tally the scores? So unintentional injury and suicide, good. Let's go to the next slide. I'm really pleased with this group because one, Sarah and I do a lot of work on unintentional injuries. And, I like to start off by saying, look, we're going to talk about suicides, but I think when we talk about the teen population, you can't forget about unintentional injuries. And close to 45% of teen deaths are the result of unintentional injuries. The box on your left is from the CDC, and it always covers the 10 leading causes of injury, death. And, a lot of us like to use this as just a graphic. And you'll see in the blue are the unintentional injuries. But unfortunately, right below that is suicide. And close to about 1/4 of teen deaths are the result of suicide. And if you want to put the two together, we're talking about close to 70% of teen deaths are the result of unintentional injuries and suicide. So if we're going to have anticipatory guidance discussion, we really should be including these in our everyday discussions with teenagers. Next slide. All right, so next question for the group is, what injury mechanisms cause the most teen deaths? Just like before, answer the question and then we'll kind of review results. All right, should we take a look at what everyone put? So good. So again, motor vehicle collisions and firearms are 1 and 2. Do you want to go to the next slide? Next slide. So as you can see, unintentional motor vehicle traffic injuries are number 1. They're always number 1. I mean, when I think about injuries, you think about force causing damage to your body. There are a lot of cars go very fast. And so we have a lot of car crashes as a result, motor vehicle collision deaths. That is always number 1. But unfortunately, if you take a look at this graphic, when you look at 3 and 4, suicide by firearm and homicide by firearm is a significant cause of injury. And unfortunately, these injuries continue to increase as opposed to motor vehicle collisions, which kind of have decreased over time, mainly because of protective devices like airbags and seat belts. Unfortunately, the firearm injuries continue to increase. Next slide. So, and as we just talked about with the firearm death rates in the United States increasing, boy, they're increasing compared to all other countries, which is really sad. In fact, in the United States accounts for about 91% of children killed in high-income countries. So you can't sit there and say, well, there's nothing that can be done, because obviously these other countries such as Scotland, England, Australia, Israel, they are doing something right. And their firearm deaths are significantly reduced. If you take a look in the US, unfortunately, homicides are far greater than these other areas. Suicide is high in some areas, but you don't see it as much in Scotland and Netherlands. So we need to learn from some of our other countries as to what can we do. But the idea that there's nothing we can do is really not true. Next slide. And so, as I said, we're going to talk a little bit about US firearm injuries. And unfortunately, there really is a problem. If you take a look at it in the United States, there's close to 1,800 deaths every year as a result of firearm death. Homicides are up about 53% and suicides are 38%. Both of them are up since 2013. So as I stated before, unfortunately, these numbers continue to increase. And again, unfortunately, in suicides, we have an 80% increase in suicides among kids that are less than 14 years of age. And so the suicide problem is only getting worse because it's affecting younger kids. We're seeing more kids that are depressed, and the suicide rates continue to increase. And as I said, that the deaths are only really the tip of the iceberg. If you take a look at non-fatal injuries, they require ED visits. Those are up as well. In fact, ED visits for self-harm have increased by about 300%, and all mental health disorders are up about 60%. So within the ER that I work in, when I started a long time ago, there were maybe about 600 to 800 psych evals per year. We're seeing that per month now. So these numbers just continue to increase, and we really need to find a way to to prevent these suicide fatalities. Next slide. So, we're in the state of Ohio, and just to give you a better understanding of what's happening in Ohio, we too have found a 27.4% increase in suicide deaths from 2010 to 2019. And if you look at the different counties, you would think that, well, maybe this is only happening in specific counties, but unfortunately it's not. It's happening in rural counties, it's happening in urban counties, it's happening all throughout the state. And so we really need to find ways that we can adjust this so we're not seeing these suicide completions, especially those by firearm. Next slide. So next question for the group. What percentage of Ohio gun owners report that a firearm is kept unlocked in their home? All right. What are the results? Interesting. So a lot of people are kind of all over the board on this one. We can go to the next slide. So if you take a look, over half of all homes have a firearm, which accounts for close to 200 million handguns in the United States. But if you look in Ohio, about 40% of households have a firearm, but in the question, 50% report that their gun was unlocked in a location that was accessible to teens. So for those that answered 50%, they were correct in that we have close to half of guns in a house are really just not being secured in the home. Next slide. So, and we have evidence that a firearm in the home increases a kid's risk to suicide. So it gives you about 5% or 5 times a greater increased risk of suicide than using it to protect your home. A 3% increase in homicide in the house as opposed to protecting your home. And the risk of a fatal shooting of a household member is 22 times increase compared to affecting it against an intruder in the home. So by having a firearm in the home increases the risk of suicide and household shootings. I mean, it's not much different, and Sarah's going to talk about this more. Having a pool at your home increases the risk of drowning, of course. So what do we do with a pool? We put a fence around it. We have to put some barriers in. And so that's kind of what we're going to be talking about a little more with Store It Safe. Next slide. So, and of youth who completed a suicide by firearm, 82% used a gun from their home. So if we could make it so that kids cannot have access to the firearm in their home, they're likely not going to get a firearm from other places. Kids typically don't get a firearm and go and buy it at a store, or they don't get it from a friend. Most often they know where a firearm is located and is accessible, and that's where they're going to get it. Next slide. And the idea of a barrier is that most kids, when they think about suicide, they act on it because they're incredibly impulsive. So they've done some interviews with survivors of near lethal suicide attempts, and 25% made an attempt within 5 minutes of the decision, 50% within 20 minutes, and 71% within 1 hour. And most of them did it within an hour of a crisis, such as a breakup or a fight with their family. So if you have the ability to make it so that the teen can't have access to lethal means, especially within that first hour, many times they'll calm down and the attempt won't be made. And so it's what we really need to do is find ways that we can make it so kids can't have access to these firearms. Next slide. And we hear a lot of the time that, you know what, my teen, they get straight A's. My teen, it doesn't have any problems. I don't even understand. I'd rather have a gun accessible to me than worry about my teenager. However, there's two things. One, 25% of teens are depressed at any given time. And so these kids are incredibly impulsive, and something had happened, and then all of a sudden it's a catastrophic event or their life is over. And so the idea is that all guns should be stored safely, because you never know when your teenager is going to have a problem and be depressed. That's why it's important to always screen. It's important for families to talk to them, and it's important for firearms to be secured safely. Next slide. And unfortunately, this has become more of a political issue than really a safety issue. You know, when you talk to a lot of the doctors responsible for gun ownership, they'll say doctors should not routinely ask patients about guns in their home. And then if you ask the Children's Defense Fund, they'll say, protect your child, don't have a gun in your home. Next slide. And there are common triggers for suicide, which is bullying. And you could just scroll through all of these. The bullying can lead to lower school performance and detachment from others. Internet usage. So studies have shown more than 5 hours of video game or internet use is strongly associated with depression and suicidality. Increases in stress in school and at home. And for example, as Chris mentioned when we started, COVID has really been a stress for a lot of teenagers. And then recent attempts by self or others. Next slide. So in reality, and we can scroll through these as well, children commonly live in environments where there is a firearm. The young kids are incredibly curious, but then the older kids are incredibly impulsive. And as I showed you, within 1 hour, kids are going to actually act when they have the thought. Next slide. So, you know, as we mentioned before that, the organizations, you know, different ones have different viewpoints. And this really became a problem because some will say we shouldn't have a gun. Others will say, you know what, you need a gun to protect yourself. And unfortunately, just the idea of discussing guns became political. Go to the next slide. And so I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to have her discuss kind of how we handled the politics of firearms and how we came up with the Store It Safe program.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you all for joining us today. It's a beautiful spring day here in Ohio, and we're so excited to have so many different people from all different organizations joining us today. So as Mike kind of laid the groundwork for, guns have become political when they should be public health issues. And we need to figure out a way that we can talk about these without being in an argument or without putting up those walls, defensive walls, as soon as the gun discussion begins. So actually, could you go back to the previous slide, please? We had decided at the American Academy of Pediatrics that although there are all different organizational viewpoints on gun ownership, really what our priority is around this topic is safety of children. And so if the gun has a home or the home has a gun in it, fine. How do we manage that to keep the child safe? If the home doesn't have a gun in it, how do we keep that child safe when they go to other homes? So we brought together this group of this is our original partnership here. We've since grown it as we've expanded our topics, but we have the Buckeye Firearms Association, which is sort of the state version of the NRA. We have Blackwing Shooting Center, gun retailers, concealed carry instructors. We have Columbus Police, Kiwanis, as well as us. We had pediatricians who were gun owners, pediatricians who were not, military, just a huge group of people. Next slide. And what our goal was just to come up with some common ground, which actually wasn't that hard to do. You know, we wanted to come up with some common ground and then come up with a message that we all felt comfortable saying on behalf of all of our organizations. And then we wanted to promote that message throughout the state so that people heard it over and over and over again. Next slide. I won't spend a lot of time on this slide. Mike already went through it, but just as we would with any other safety topic, you know, we can talk about drowning, we can talk about safety, just as we can talk about suicide and safe gun storage, but that's just one layer. You know, we really need those barriers. So that middle call or row there is about creating barriers. So to create a barrier to a pool to prevent drowning, we put a four-sided fence up. To create a barrier to a gun to eliminate accidental or intentional deaths with firearms, we lock it away so that they can't access it. And then of course, you know, if you don't have a pool, that obviously eliminates the access to the pool, just as if you don't have a gun in the home, that eliminates the access within the home. But you have to remember, you know, your child, whether it's a toddler or whether it's a teenager, as in one of the cases that Mike mentioned, maybe going into a home where there is a gun. So safety is still really important to be talking about in all children, whether there's a gun in the home or not. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to go through these pretty quickly because I think many people have probably heard this, but always a good idea to think about those lessons we learned in those conversations with our partners. You know, we had a lot of gun experts in the room, and what we learned is that there's some general distrust of the medical community, especially around firearm conversations and firearm ownership. They often feel judged, and so may or may not answer questions truthfully. And it's all in the approach. They're open to the conversation. They want to keep kids safe, but don't want their gun ownership documented for fear of a registry, and they don't want to feel judged for having a gun in their home. So, you know, the AAP, or I'm sorry, yeah, the AAP policy statement on gun safety says the safest home is a home without a gun, and the data certainly does support that. However, if a family does not believe that to be true, and they believe that their home is safer with a gun, you know, you telling them to get the gun out of the home is really a non-starter. They are not going to be motivated to change their behavior because the AAP policy statement says so. So we really need to be open to a conversation and see where their family's coming from, and then really be partners in the safety piece. And then the other thing that the gun experts told us was they felt that gun boxes were much more protective than cable locks. Next slide, please. So we all agreed on store it safe. It's pretty simple. If you have a gun, store it safe, lock it away, keep it away from young children and teenagers. These are examples of handouts that we created for the younger age group. There's one for providers because we know that pediatricians aren't fantastic about talking about gun safety in the office. So what are ways that we can incorporate that into our safety discussion to make it more natural and make it more a part of what we do consistently? And then one for families as well. Next slide. Okay. We also, as part of this, developed a pilot presentation where pediatricians were handing gun boxes out at the 2 and 3 year well visit. We figured that is the age where kids are mobile, they're curious, and they're strong enough to pull a trigger. So families were all educated at these visits. They were offered a gun box, and then all families, whether they took a gun box or not, were surveyed after the visit. Next slide. Okay, and what we found was great. 95% of the families surveyed did feel that they had received some sort of education about gun storage. Next slide. The other thing is that 49% stated that they learned something new about gun safety today at their visit. Now, if you remember, what are we teaching? We're teaching one thing. if you have a gun, store it safe. So 49% of the people who were responding on that survey felt like that was new information. Next slide. And then they also stated that 48% of the respondents said they wanted to hear information on firearm safety from their provider. So we do need to be talking about this. It's really important. And I'm a primary care pediatrician. I know how much we have to cover during that visit. It really only takes a second to like briefly touch on this point, but it's so critically important. Next slide. Okay, and then more recently, we've been focused more on our adolescents and teen suicide. Next slide. Okay, these are some screenshots from our documentation, the resources that are available to all of you. So I'll go through these fairly quickly because, as I said, you can access these at any point on our website. But during the well child visit, we want to make sure we're screening for depression and suicidality at every visit. We want to advise all families to have a barrier for all lethal means. So we're talking about guns, but we're also talking about over-the-counter medications like Tylenol. We want to prevent that access to allow time for the impulsivity, the moment in which they're really upset to pass, and then hopefully talk to a trusted adult and get the help they need before doing something irreversible. And then F, families really need to be having ongoing check-ins with their teen. And as Mike said, you know, it's not, oh, my teen doesn't have depression or my teen doesn't have any mental health issues. It doesn't matter. All teens need to have these regular check-ins with their family and keep that dialogue going, making sure that the child or the teen knows that there's an open channel of communication in case they're starting to feel anxious or starting to have thoughts about hurting themselves. And then E is for emergency department referrals. If there is a urgent life-threatening condition or concern at that time, the patient's actively suicidal with a plan. And we'll talk a little bit through kind of how to sort those things out. What is actually an emergency versus what is something that we can do some bridging or getting counseling as an outpatient. Next slide. And this is just a sample algorithm. You know, we all work in different settings. I know we have some educators on here. So this is just something that we use as an example. We definitely recommend using a validated depression screening tool at every visit. For this example, we're using PHQ-9. Then depending on the results, you can see in that orange box, depending on, you know, no symptoms, mild, moderate, severe, it kind of walks you through what you need to do next. Obviously, we need to, if there's any sort of positivity to the depression screen, we need to assess for suicidality and take appropriate next steps. But even if the child scores a 0 on this screen, we still need to be talking about safe storage. Next slide. And these are, it's a front and back handout available for parents of teens. Next slide. This is a rack card that we created with input from teens, which has been a fun process, and they had a lot of really great input into the creation of this, but a rack card for teens that you can have in your office. And it's something that not only is specific to them, but their friends. You know, if you see a friend who's doing something, you know, what steps should you take? And these would also be great, like in the counseling office or at school, a great resource for teens. Next slide, please. And we also have training modules online. The intro training module is pretty much what we just kind of went through, but then there's one more specific for young children and then one more specific for adolescents. And then also at that website, you can take our Store It Safe pledge. Next slide. One of the things that we did in preparation for this talk today is we reached out to people who have been involved in some way in our Store It Safe learning, whether it was through our fundraiser and luncheon at annual meeting, whether it was through some of the webinars that we've done, whether it's through people who have received some of the gun boxes through the Ohio AAP. And we reached out to them and asked them, you know, what materials are you using after attending the webinar or training? And at least 55% were using at least one resource that they had learned about from their training. Next slide. And then when we asked them what were the most informative and helpful Store It Safe resources, 36% found the web page to be the most helpful. 29% felt like the live webinars. 32% were using the handouts and the rack cards, and 3% were watching the recorded presentations. Next slide. And then this is just kind of a breakdown of the most used Store It Safe resources. 42% obviously were using the gun boxes, 27% the parent handouts, 16% using the provider handout, and 15% using the teen rack card. And I will say the teen rack card and the handouts have been relatively new additions to our resources. Next slide, please. And it's really a wide range of people who are using our materials. It's not just physicians and healthcare providers, but we have county health departments, community organizations, schools, our first responders, and then other nonprofits as well. Next slide. Okay, so obviously you're all attending because you have some sort of interest in safe gun storage, reducing suicidality, and what can you do today? You know, there's a lot that you can start doing. One, you can get on our website right now, take our pledge, and the pledge just simply says, yeah, you know what, I'm going to do something. And that can really vary. It can mean I'm going to start, you know, talking within my community about safe gun storage, or I'm going to use these resources in my office. So we would love to have you take our pledge. Our goal is to have 100 providers and 100 community advocates take our pledge, and we are already well over our goals. So any other people who we are having join today, we would really appreciate it. And you'll also be updated kind of as we release new products, new learning materials. Next slide. All right, this is a great example of some different healthcare institutions really getting involved in the Store It Safe message. This is a billboard up in Akron from Akron Children's. And what I love about this billboard is it really speaks to the restriction of access to all lethal means. So you've got your medications in there, your gun, and then also thinking about alcohol and the role that it plays in intentional and unintentional injury and death. Next slide. Okay, so in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Dr. Peltier, who is going to introduce our next speaker. My contact information and mics are here available, and then we'll be answering questions shortly. You can see that the lockbox, this is what the lockboxes look like. I see a lot of questions coming up in the chat boxes. Many of them are being answered kind of real time. So any ones that aren't addressed, we can follow up on after. Next slide, please. Great, and this is just another link to the pledge. Next slide. Okay, I will turn it over to Dr. Peltier. Thank you.
Thank you both to Drs. Gittleman and Dr. Denny. They really have been sort of the blood, sweat, and tears of this movement for the last several years. And I think their passion really comes through. And I would encourage all of you, again, if you have not signed up for the pledge, please do so. You really can make a difference. And that's why we continue to sort of talk about this very important program. It's now my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Emily Harris. Dr. Harris is a psychiatrist in the Division of Psychiatry and a pediatrician in the Division of General and Community Pediatrics at Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center. She is triple board certified in pediatrics, psychiatry, and child and adolescent psychiatry. Her clinical interests include general pediatrics, early identification and treatment of mental health risk factors, improving awareness and prevention of mental health disorders in youth, childhood depression, anxiety disorders, and ADHD. Dr. Harris is engaged with the Ohio AAP in several quality improvement projects and is an advisor for several years. Dr. Harris.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And I have to say, I love speaking to people. I also love seeing people. If anybody feels comfortable enough to open their camera, I'm going to break a few of the rules and ask to see your face. But thank you. Dr. Peltier, this has been an amazing experience to come before everybody and to share this information. I think the Store It Safe program, I was so skeptical when I first heard it, honestly, but the idea of just like a seatbelt, you just give the lockbox, regardless if your house has a gun or somebody else's house has a gun. It's just the idea is safety. And I was hooked. So I'm going to talk a little bit, and I know Dr. Denny did talk a bit about suicide and depression, a little bit on the screening, but I'm going to try. I have my little timer set for 40 minutes so that I give enough time for questions to chat with you a little bit about what do you do with depression and how do you manage that. So go ahead and next slide. All right, I don't have any disclosures other than I love my job. Okay. So great. So then I'm going to just illustrate some of the best evidence to reinforce youth mental health. We're going to talk about a specific tool to look at how to assess suicide severity risk, and then how you respond to it in primary care, or even just generally when somebody talks to you about having thoughts about wanting to end their life. That's a pretty serious and pretty intense vulnerability that they shared with you, and um, can only be helpful. So next slide. Oh, actually, before you go there, don't do the next slide. Just think about if you guys could put it in a chat. Close your eyes. When you think about good mental health, what does that mean to you? And just like throw a couple of words in chat about when you think about good mental health. Fantastic. I'm seeing resiliency, confidence, optimism, feeling supported, healthy coping, happiness, satisfaction. Awesome. These are great. Cool. Keep them going. All right. Next slide. Great. So we talk a lot about mental health, but we usually use it in the context of mental health disorders. I really just want to emphasize that mental health is incredibly important to child development. And one of the main reasons why I chose to do the triple board program, because I still see myself as a pediatrician who can handle the psych stuff, but it's really the pediatrics is where a lot of these great things can happen even before it becomes a disorder. The common things that are, when we think about mental health, it's like this confidence, courage, adaptability. Actually, this flexibility is incredibly important. Cheerfulness, or that optimism to live to be 98, being able to attend and have concentration, being able to be like a peacemaker or finding harmony in things that are distressing, and kind of a lot of us that got through stuff. I mean, everybody's gone through stuff. That hardiness that you get, and the last one is the social connectedness, and especially for youth, that feeling of connection is an incredibly powerful tool. Okay, next slide. All right, so I want to read this to you because it's awfully wordy, but it's a story. So Mrs. York brought her daughter in, her daughter Laura, to your office. And I apologize if this could be a school classroom, this could be a lot of different things, but long story short, kind of make it for what it works for you. And her mom brought her in after, she threatened to take some pills as she was told to get up her cell phone because of her grades. The triage nurse talks with Laura, and this is also to highlight that it doesn't have to be the pediatrician all the time. I think there's a lot of people, these tools are created for people, but we'll get into that in a minute. Asks her, have you wished you were dead? Well, sure, hasn't everyone? Have you had any thoughts of killing yourself? And Laura responds, no. The nurse then asks, have you ever done anything, started to do anything, or prepared to do anything to end your life? Laura pauses and she giggles and she's like, oh my gosh. So she took about like 5 melatonin pills one night. And then the next morning, she immediately regretted it because she felt so stupid thinking that that would kill her. All right, question. Hit the, yeah. What would be the most appropriate next step for the triage nurse? To send the patient to the emergency room for a full psychiatric eval and refer to therapy. Ask the patient how long ago it was when she took the pills that she wanted to die by suicide. Offer a supportive statement about how great it was that she did not die, and offer a visit in the primary care office in 2 days, or reassure Mrs. York that her actions had very low risk of dying and provide her with information for a therapist. We'll give a few people some time to answer. All right. And this is also, I believe, how you get your CME credit. I think most of us know these Zoom meetings by now, but that's another way to count that you're participating. So we'll get to see some results, I think. Great. So the majority of people ask her how long ago it was that she wanted to die by suicide. And for those who are somewhat surprised by that, we'll actually get to that by the end of the talk, and hopefully you'll be more comfortable answering that question. But yes, that is the correct answer. All right, and we're going to keep going forward because we're going to hit why those other reasons aren't probably the best next step. Next, okay, good. This is another quick question. What is the FDA approved adjunctive first line pharmacotherapy option for major depressive disorder, moderate to severe, with no evidence of suicidality or lethality in a 9-year-old? And when I say adjunctive, I mean it's in addition to psychotherapy, which is the appropriate first step. Hi, Laura. Hi, Rosemary. All right, and great. Actually, we do have some mix here. It's not age appropriate, sertraline or fluoxetine. And we are going to get right into it. Next slide. Okay, so this is like a crazy busy slide. So I have been recently asked to put all of depression into one page, and I could not do it. But this is kind of the assessment of risk and depressive symptoms as well. So it's like thinking about it, like a patient comes into your office, like who do you treat or who do you screen? Um, there's risk factors like bullying, I think was mentioned before, peer groups. I'm going to fly through this. Foster care. These are things that we kind of think about but often forget. These are higher risk of having depression or a type of like risk factor for depression. Neglect, other traumatic experiences, grief. There's also personal, interpersonal history and family history, like a family history of somebody dying by suicide, of any psychiatric disorder. A chronic medical condition, actually, I think is a big one because we often think, oh, well, they have this, that's why they're depressed, but you still have to treat the depression because it's going to impact their outcome. So when you have a risk, and if you do like any validated screen, the head screen, the PHQ-2, the I'm blanking on the billion others like the Beck depression, whatever you choose, as long as it's a validated screen, the AAP or actually the guidelines for GLAD-PC were like, just go ahead and use that. And if it has an elevated screen, great. We use the PHQ-9 as a standard to kind of test how severe things are. But if it scores over 10, the likelihood of there being diagnosed with depression is pretty high. I just put on over here like the SIGI caps, which are the depressive symptoms. And it is what we learned in medical school, but it also helps just to remember what you might see or what you might find. If you're listening in a history and you hear something like a psychosis piece or like drugs and alcohol or extreme mood changes that affect their peer relationships, we're not talking about moody teens. We're talking about moody teens that even moody teens don't want to be around or are alienated by. High risk taking behaviors, like lots of criminality or overspending, things like that. These are all red flags, and that should absolutely be called like consult your specialist or refer for treatment, as this has a higher, well, it's just a need that something's going on that needs to be addressed. Physical exam on these kids, sometimes with depressed kids, they just look like grouchy oppositional kids who usually refuse to answer, I think is a common thing I see in the um, physical exam, or difficult to engage or something like that. But they might have something as subtle as a change in weight. They could have evidence of self-injury. That doesn't always mean depression, but it does indicate that there's something, maladaptive about their coping style, or just medically unexplained pain is another really common thing. So thinking about depression, if they have had depression or are kind of having depression risk, and especially if on that PHQ-9, number 9, say yes, or you have concerns about suicidality, it is always appropriate to screen for suicidality. And we're going to get to how to do that in just a couple of minutes, but I wanted to go over some of the general depression first. Big key concept. Primary care providers can help caregivers appreciate when a change in behavior or attitude may indicate a treatable mental health problem. So, the big idea is that we want to hit those modifiable risk factors. And this all leads in, like, depression is one of the most common associations of death by suicide. It's not all cases. You can absolutely have those impulsive um, moments in your life that are very stressful. It's about emotional regulation. It's about all of those things that kind of build up into those protective factors for mental health that people need to arm themselves with. But if they do have depression, this is a treatable illness, and it's potentially fatal if not treated. Not all the time, thank goodness, but it can be. Next slide. So kind of the basic approach in primary care is, routinely screen everybody because it's an internalizing disorder. They're not going to tell you, hey, by the way, I'm depressed, because guess what? Kids don't know that. Or if they do, they're going to be too grouchy to tell you or irritated that you don't care or not listening. This is actually one of my favorite populations to work with, are kids that don't think are misunderstood and hard to talk to. But you need to detect and evaluate the risk. That's the big job of primary care. Is what we do 24/7 all the time, every day with kids. You want to actively intervene, and even the idea of increasing protective factors like the social connectedness, or the adaptability, the cheerfulness, like just highlighting those strengths is an intervention. You want to minimize the risk. So, making sure that whatever is happening is kind of improving the child's health. And then overall, like the physical health, because physical health and mental health are connected. That's, again, I will talk about that. It's a totally different talk. But if they're not, the idea is that you keep following up with them until they're better. If they had an asthma attack, you wouldn't give them like steroids and say, okay, I'll see you in a year. It's like you need to follow up with kids and see if they're getting better. Even if you had sent them to pulmonology, you would still see them back like every 3 months in your office to make sure that they're doing well if they have an acute asthma or require, controller medications. But if they're not better, if they're not getting better, you have to do something. That's like a big deal. So stepping up the treatment, consulting with a specialist, collaborating with their treatment team. These are all extremely important interventions that help get a kid better faster. All right, next slide. And thinking about medication, because that's what everybody loves talking about, I know, is fluoxetine. And again, so like education is like the lowest reliability of behavior change, but this is also helpful to know what the guidelines are. So first line medication, fluoxetine is Prozac. Keep going. Second line is actually escitalopram. And I'm not going to make you guys guess ages, but actually fluoxetine is FDA approved for major depressive disorder ages 8 and older. It's like FDA approved for 8 and older. And second line, escitalopram is FDA approved for major depression for ages 12 and older. These are the only two medications that are FDA approved for major depressive disorder. The others that we use, and keep going. Like I don't know why I have so many animations. So sertraline or Zoloft has like really solid evidence in pediatric anxiety disorders, but there was no placebo change from the sertraline and just the limited studies they had with depression. But it's a really good option because 90% of the time, depression is not just depression. There's something else with it, like anxiety. And anxiety is definitely not going to tell you that it's part of the picture until they get to know you a little bit more and start to trust that you're going to get better. So thinking about fluoxetine and Actually, I just put the FDA approvals down there at the bottom just to make sure you guys had it. Great. Next slide. Big, my 2 cents for the medication pearls. I'm not going to hit these too hard, but basically what's not recommended in children or adolescents, paroxetine or Paxil is an SSRI, has a lot of side effects, very short half-life, and it's not well tolerated by kids. And there's not much evidence that it's helpful other than some panic disorders. Desvenlafaxine Pristique is designed to be on that gene site green category. However, it has like very little to no efficacy, actually no efficacy in children proven with evidence-based results. And that's the whole point of it, was to be in that clean pharmacogenetic pathway. There's probably evidence in adults, but I don't treat adults, but it does not work in kids. Venlafaxine is actually the reason that triggered the boxed warning for suicidality in all antidepressants. So unless they are working closely with a child psychiatrist, I would not expect a pediatrician to prescribe venlafaxine in children. So the other things that aren't first line are fluvoxamine, citalopram, or tazepam, and tricyclics. Again, these are mostly for efficacy and side effects. The most common side effect that kids have is GI, like gastrointestinal. This goes away in about 4 or 5 days. And especially since these kids likely have anxiety too, what I'll often say before I give the medication or kind of offer is like, we're going to start at the lowest possible dose and then see how your body kind of works with it. You're probably going to feel nothing, but some of the kids feel like this like bubbly, I think, butterfly feeling in their stomach, and it shouldn't be painful. It's not explosive diarrhea. It's just like a buttery butterfly feeling, like when you're about to give a presentation. It should get better in about 4 or 5 days. That's when the receptors downregulate. But if you have that, that's actually a good sign that the medicine's working. So hang in there. And if it's not getting better in a week or so, let me know. If you don't notice anything, I want you to go up in the dose, and then I give the parameters for a titration. I see them back in the office in 4 weeks. Kids with anxiety will feel every side effect more. So it's incredibly important that you prepare them for side effects of gastrointestinal kind of discomfort, or they're going to stop the medication thinking that they're going to have like a giant ulcer or hole in their stomach or something like that. Like, anxiety is mean. But basically, kids actually, the faster you get them into treatment, the lower their risk of suicidality occurs. And actually, when they did some of the studies, it was the idea that when kids were only partially treated for depression is when depression worsened and the hopelessness started, because now they're in treatment and they're still not getting better. And that's like when kids, like, that's really depression undertreated is causing the higher suicidality risk. All right, next. Okay, so thinking about, I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes about like this mental health concept. So when you think about increasing disease acuity, like pretty much like everyone gets, like, the intervention is like brain health promotion. This is kind of the thinking of the mental health continuum from the AAP, is this idea of, what do you do to improve social emotional health in kids? Then at the next level, some of the kids are going to have some problem focused things like problem solving, or these brief interventions that can happen in the office. Let's get you a 504, let's kind of solve the issues, let's teach you some skills about relaxation, and you're going to bring them back in a month and they're going to get a lot better. Go back to brain health. A couple of the kids, like a little majority of them, are going to be like therapy, maybe a medication or not. Even higher level of acuity, medication and therapy. And then a small portion are going to need to be seen by a specialist. We always think about mental health in this category up here, like it does not have any meaning unless there's a medication with it. But move forward, please. One of the most earth-shattering concepts was this idea that the biggest impact primary care can have is actually doing what you're already doing, which is promoting health, preventing it. Thinking about these early interventions, not waiting until it becomes a disorder that you actually have to treat with medication, but when it's just a problem or risk is present, attacking that aggressively drops the entire duration and acuity, impairments, morbidity, and even severity of the illness, as well as it lowers a child's risk of recurrence even well into early adulthood. When we're able to kind of get it address it quickly. So this is like literally why primary care has such a bigger impact than psychiatry, because we are like so far down the line by the time the kids come to us. Next slide. So just thinking about these kind of concepts, this anticipatory guidance is very strength-based, like, wow, you did great this year in math. How were you able to do that? Or you worked really hard as a soccer player, or, we screen everybody because it's really hard to know what somebody's thinking. And I need to ask questions about if you're thinking about dying or if you're sad, because I can't tell just from looking at you. And looking at these identified risk factors and what we can modify, this is a great time for like when there's risk. It's like when the kid's throwing a tantrum in the office, like how do you do those parenting skills, or actually which kids need to go to, parent-child interactional training or some type of more targeted intervention. And then we also have like the evidence-based treatments for those diagnosed mental health disorders. Next slide. Okay, so kind of like the last of my harping on this is the idea of anticipatory guidance, no matter what level of severity they are, is really critical to helping kids get better faster. This idea of like a strength-based approach with it. What are you doing well? What is going okay? Especially for depression, because part of the disorder is to make you discount things that are positive. So even if something great happened, it's hard to feel that joy and have that dopaminergic effect because of depression. It's kind of mean. It's like these muddy colored glasses that that kind of puts on your face, and then everything just looks gross to people when they have depression, and they don't feel good. It's not a good feeling. Problem focused things, and then just again, small majority to have these brief interventions, or even in primary care, it's really connecting to the evidence-based treatment, whether that's in your office or with a mental health professional that you are partnered with, but just connecting them to treatment is the key. And you can do some of these in your office if you're interested. Next slide. All right. So when do you start to treat depression? Go ahead. All right. So again, primary care physicians play a huge role, critical role in the early identification of these risk factors. You want to treat it before it becomes a disorder. You want to intervene. Next. So thinking about it, these are actually 11 warning signs from a nationwide project that happened that the AAP was part of, but it really came up with these 11 warning signs that a mental health condition could be, or their mental health is at risk, or might have might need especially treatment, essentially. So feeling sad or withdrawn for 2 weeks or more, seriously trying to harm or kill themselves. And I actually don't like the word seriously, because any attempt to harm or kill yourself is serious, period. Um, we'll get to that in just a second. These are great things: sudden feeling of overwhelmed, intense worries or fears, mood swings that cause problems in peer relationships, um, involved in multiple fights. Actually, bullying, kids who bully others are 3 times more likely to have meet criteria for depression than same age peers. Um, there's also other things about severe out of control behavior, drastic changes in their personality, or even actually, I look at weight often to see a kid that suddenly starts shooting up in weight. I often ask what happened at that point in time, or extreme difficulty concentrating that puts themselves in danger or causes like academic failure or some type of impairment. And again, repeated drugs or alcohol. I think it's like, like the experimenting, like no amount of alcohol is okay. And with kids, it's like, oh, just a sip, fine. If they're doing it over and over again, that's the kid telling you that there's a problem. There's something that they're trying to fix. Next. So the idea, intervening, no matter what skill level you have, is reinforcing those positive protective factors, minimize the risk. Store it safe is spot on with this message. Minimize the amount of impairments and regularly monitor the kids. Like make sure you come back like every month to see and make sure they're getting better and that they've recovered. Focus on brain health and self-management skills. Give them one tiny little thing that they can do to that they couldn't do before, or that they had done before, but depression's getting in the way. Give them small goals that they come up with to help improve the self, get the little dopaminergic push to happen. So those successes are so critical. Next. All right. So this is my fun slide about promoting healthy brains, about being, one-to-one time with a parent, a teacher, anybody. Um, Sleeping is probably the biggest thing in this picture that is important to mental health and healthy brains, and that's something pediatricians absolutely have a huge role in helping coach parents about how to help their kids sleep. Gratitude and kindness is a tremendous gift and huge dopaminergic surge in the brain that is very positive and helps with recovery and how to manage stress. Everybody has stress. There's never a good time to not have stress, like especially with the pandemic. Like, geez, it was like a giant worldwide stress experiment. How are we getting through this? How do you get that mindfulness and those skills back to feel centered again? Next. Exercise too. Yes, activity was one of them. Thank you, Jen Hardy. Activity was one of those as well. Social connectedness actually is probably one of the strongest protective factors against suicide risk in teens. Resiliency factors. So there's some things, and Dr. Duffy is very familiar with these, but there's some things that are modifiable and some things that are not. Adaptability to change is a lot harder to modify if a personality is very rigid. However, we can teach coping skills and we can teach problem solving. And it's not like which problem I think is going to work. It's actually the kid developing the skill of problem solving that's really critical. The cultural, personal, religious beliefs that discourage suicide are incredibly protective as well. And access to behavioral health, especially effective behavioral health care. Next. Okay, so the AAP clinical report said, for clinicians rendering pediatric care, like anyone, identify and management of adolescents at risk for suicide is a critical component. Keep clicking. Suicide risk can never be eliminated. It can only be reduced. Risk factors are nothing more than guidance, and the care of suicidal adolescents improved when it started in primary care. Ready access to the appropriate community resources and mental health professions. A lot of times parents don't know where to go or that this is a mental health crisis when a child's thinking about dying, and you are their first contact with where to go next. Okay. So thinking about suicide risk, these are general approaches. Have you ever thought about killing yourself or wish you were dead? Have you ever done anything on purpose to hurt yourself or kill yourself? These are hard questions to say, by the way, and hard questions to hear. I highly encourage you to practice with someone that you can practice with, even your peers or your other colleagues and things, like, because it's hard to say it the first time, but you need to kind of rip off the Band-Aid and ask. Identify what the risk factors and the red flags are, which we're going to go over, and see if there's like current problems and conflicts, like the degree of intent is important, like this, but really the exposure to mental illness, suicidal behaviors, and substance use are probably the most important red flags or risk factors when thinking about suicide in youth. Next. Okay, so the elevated concerns, if there is, alcohol or substance use or drug abuse would be, again, those kind of that store it safe from Akron. They nailed it. The alcohol piece is like you're less inhibited. Your judgment is off or impaired when you're under the influence of something else. Legal problems, being the victim of bullying or exposed to abuse, even if it's not towards that person directly. Often intimate partner violence is not listed as a possible trauma for a child. Exposure to suicidal behaviors of others, concerning behaviors, a previous suicide attempt, a very high risk factor, access to lethal means such as firearms, practicing acts that lead to suicide is a very concerning behavior, as well as making suicidal statements. Next. I keep trying to click it like I can do it. So we use the, and we're starting to kind of spread this, but in this area, we use the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale for primary care pediatricians when we're talking to pediatricians. And actually, this is for any person that is not a mental health specialist. So these is literally designed to be administered by people that have no mental health training. And you just literally read the italicized questions. Next slide. So kind of zooming in on those italicized questions, and just reading it directly off, I was like, I'm going to ask you some questions. I saw here that, I mean, sometimes these thoughts come and go for kids. So we just ask everyone would be like a general way to neutralize it, or, I'm concerned. I need to know a little bit more about what you mean when you answered yes to number 9. I'm going to ask you a series of questions and just let me know. Have you ever wished you were dead or wished you could go to sleep and not wake up? Just like literally read it exactly. And it's yes or no. So if they say yes to that, but have you ever actually had any thoughts of killing yourself? No, then you still ask number 6, which is why it's like really these 3 questions. Have you ever done anything, started to do anything, or prepared to do anything to end your life? And if they say no, ever, yes, then you have to ask, was it within an acute period? It could be either a month or 3 months. I think for primary care, it's 3 months. Let's get you into someone who knows how to do a safety assessment and a safety evaluation if you had no comfort or training with it. But these other pieces, these like how, method, intent is incredibly important details, are part of this risk assessment that you can just ask with like 6 simple questions. Next. And this helps you determine what to do. So as Dr. Denny was referring to, we don't really know what to do when somebody says, yeah, I thought about killing myself. But that doesn't always equal emergency room evaluation. And these questions help you tease out who needs to go right now and who is potentially able to safety plan and be seen the next day, and who is like, okay, did you tell your therapist you've had thoughts like that? All right, I'll give them a call and just let them know, or have them see you within a week. Is really the 3 different levels of intervention for that. And it's really about the safety evaluation. Next. So just thoughts, even active thoughts, is technically low risk if it's still risk, but it's low risk if there's no intent, no access to lethal means, they don't have a plan, they had never even tried before, they have many protective factors, and they're just expressing that they are not okay. If there's a method present, but no access or no intent, I would never do that to my parents. I would never do that. I don't even know where a gun is. That's actually considered moderate risk if they've thought enough about it to get to the idea of a method. If they have specific details like, I am going to wait until after school, I'm going to go to my grandparents' house, I'm going to take their medicine, put it in my book bag, walk home, take it, nobody's going to be home for 6 hours. This is like high risk. Okay, yes, we're going to keep you safe, 1-to-1 in the room. We'll get you to an evaluation now to see what kind of level of care is needed. Next. Next slide, please. So this idea of suicidal ideation, the clinical response is not nothing if it's low risk, okay? We need to connect you with and get you, hey, this is telling me that it gets so frustrating for you that you actually think that dying is something that might happen or might be okay, even if it's like in a passive form. Let's get you connected with someone who can help you work on some better coping skills or some actually healthy coping skills to help get you through these stressful times. If they're already in therapy, just say, have you talked to your therapist about this? Very informative question. And if not, or if you don't feel comfortable reaching out to the therapist, hey, by the way, this person threw this in there, just to let you know, is a great way to collaborate and make sure that there's like a warm handoff happening. Method again, or actually behavior within, actually, if it's been like more than 3 months that they've had a behavior, it sometimes is even detrimental. Like if a kid does disclose, yeah, I did try to kill myself last year and I took those 5 melatonin, but I didn't realize it wouldn't kill me. That's still incredibly important to take that seriously as well and offer, I think mom, whoever wants can keep you safe. Let's make sure that we get you the appropriate intervention that can be helpful to you, because that's a very scary time, and these thoughts can come and they can go, but we want to make sure that you have all of the armor you need to help protect yourself. Everybody, I mean, the suicide imminent risk is not hard for us to spot. Thankfully, it's rare and it's traumatizing to pediatricians and myself too, but it's rare, but you know what to do with those kids. It's these ones in the middle that I was very impressed with this tool. Next. So the next few minutes, we're going to talk about like just how to respond to suicidality. And I wanted to get some definitions going about, risk severity assessment versus a safety assessment versus safety management. So those are like actually three separate things. So detecting risk and assessing risk severity, non-specialists can do. It's risk. You're not predicting how or if a person's going to die. It is more likely how quickly do I need to get them to help or to someone who can help me evaluate this child. Safety assessments is what level of care a person needs. So even if you send them to the emergency room or whatever crisis center you have, does not equal inpatient admission, because the least restrictive environment is actually the most therapeutic way to do it. And sometimes solving problems, changing things at school, doing a partial or an intensive outpatient program is the appropriate level of care for that child. So, but really having that depend on the psychiatric specialists is the appropriate intervention. And safety management, this can happen at any level. The idea is to reinforce protective factors and decrease risk factors. Next. So again, actually we can go through this one. I have it in there twice. This will be like the anticipatory guidance piece. But go ahead. So this comes up a lot lighter on the screen here, but when you're guiding patients through crisis management, first check your own pulse, like kind of, it's okay to kind of be surprised. And actually authenticity is incredibly powerful with adolescents. It's like, wow, that sounds like a lot that you just told me. And I don't necessarily know what to say, but I'm just happy that you told me. Let's work through this a little bit more. The idea of a safety plan. Oh, in family engagement, is there? Okay. Establishing a safety in the home is something that is helpful, and it's not just about, not just about removing all access, but it's about like, what do you do when it happens again? Like, what are the triggers? What are the things that kind of get you to that thought place again? And whether or not you have time in your office or that's what happens during the safety evaluation, like I'm just kind of enlightening you on like, this is what happens. Like, what are your triggers? How do you know you're going to get there? And what will help keep you safe? And actually what the kid comes up with is 90% spot on. Like they get it. They know exactly what they need. They just don't know how to ask for it. So supporting them to say those things and kind of having this identity or identify who can support them is incredibly powerful. And encourage, like the idea that these thoughts do come, but they also go, and you don't have to act on the thoughts. If you remember back when Dr. Gittleman was talking about that 1 hour of impulsivity, like when you get into your room alone, you're really angry and you're having these thoughts, who can you reach out to that will help get you through those moments until those thoughts go away, because they always go away is often, I can't tell you how many times I've said that. And then what you do when you're in a crisis. Next. So last question, I promise. What is the function of a safety contract? And I'm going to let you guys read those. Okay. Most people have probably responded. All right. So to best reduce liability, allow the patient to physically commit to their own safety, like physically write it, set up expectations to the caregiver and patient, or to assess the level of engagement of the patient. Oh my goodness, great, cool. We have a lot to learn, which is wonderful. Next slide. So we talk about planning a lot. And why don't we talk about a contract? Like, at least in mental health, we tend not to use the word contract. Really, we want to say, we don't want to say like, don't do something. Like, that's not enough in this case. It's more about how are we going to anticipate and then mitigate when impulsivity could result in an act that would lead to suicide or death by suicide. So how do we anticipate those moments and reactions and then reduce that impulsivity that can be very dangerous in those moments? And then the idea of the contract is, it gives the caregiver and the patient a response like to the process of like how to get through this, like assess engagement. If the kid is like annoyed, not like signs it like crappy, it's like I'm not doing that, or they're not doing that, like that's actually tells you a risk of a risk factor that needs to be included in that warm handoff to caregivers or warm handoff to the treatment team. The idea of, oh, I do have, knives, or I do have blades somewhere. Okay, why don't we go to your room together and try and figure out where those things are? Are you in having a neutral person like talk about this, like really intense stuff with kids is so helpful to help get them to problem solve about where their triggers are and what do they notice, because the parents may not even know that this is happening. And keep in mind, this is traumatic for parents to hear. It's incredibly important. So keeping in mind that, this is a team effort. We're going to support each other. We've got you, and help them kind of work through this together is going to be incredibly helpful. Next. Yeah. So the idea of a contract is that the kid is like promising, like the prom promise, or the I promise not to. Like those things can be broken, which actually kind of makes the whole therapeutic process a little bit worse. But again, kids can't consent. Like the contract concept is to make the adults feel better, not the kid. What we can use it for is to come up with a plan, but kind of see where this kid is and that family dynamic piece, which is really critical to comfort level with whether you feel comfortable sending them home to safety plan, or whether you're like, no, we are going to have to go to the ER. You're going to have to go to the crisis center tonight if they can't do that. Next. Good signs, and I'm going to go through these, are people with high risk factors. So they have like all of these things, like the bullying, the gender differences, the parents just fought, the house burned down, but they still don't have thoughts of suicide. Those are like good signs. Like the kid is able to kind of manage a lot of things. Struggle with mental health concerns that are not life threatening, like anxiety or ADHD or something like that. Individuals capable and willing to be assessed and engaged, guardians who are involved, people with protective factors around them, having a social connectedness, and then the environmental factors like low risk of future self-harm, adequate supervision, and active mental health follow-up and safety planning are really critical good signs. And especially when the kid can come up with the triggers. Next. Or just a few more. It's a lot of information. You guys are doing great. So the core elements, there's 3 to make a safety plan with a kid over anything, is restrict access to lethal means. Putting the medicines away, putting the knives in the garage or in the car, any type of alcohol, different things that potentially the kid often identifies themselves as a possible lethal weapon should be restricted at least as much as possible. Taking the door off of the room is a great intervention that helps keep the kid from locking themselves in it, or of your ability to check in and monitor them according to the safety plan if needed. Engaging the concerned third party. Sometimes the parent is often in denial of what's going on, or if they are, there's lots of different reasons for that. But right now you have to think about keeping this kid safe. Who can they go to? Especially if they say their parent, that's great. But if the parent is the one enforcing the rule that's causing the problem and the conflict, who would be another person that they could go to and talk about or talk to if they were struggling? And if it's a kid that they identify, which is often the first one, I'm like, can you talk to that parent and let them know, and then have a conversation with that kid about, hey, you're a person, if this person calls you, you need to tell your parent, or you need to tell an adult that this is happening. This is not for you to fix or deal with. It's just like to be there for your friend and then let somebody know so we can get them help. Developing a safety plan that has different contingencies is also critical too. What do you do if the thoughts return and you're at home or at school or at a friend's house? What's our plan going to be? Once you have a plan, just like with parent-child interactional training, once you have a plan of steps of what to do, the emotional intensity of it kind of comes way back down, and you can think rationally again if you prepare. Next. So just thinking about the mechanics, and this is from one of my new favorite books, this is the AAP Pediatric Mental Health. It's this giant, oh, I have it underneath my laptop right now. It's this giant compendium of all of these guidelines and clinical protocols, like in one book. So I don't have to keep looking on the internet every 5 seconds for these lecture points. But the main thing is when you're assessing for suicidality, interview the patient alone whenever possible. Think about triggers, strengths, communication pathways, and it's okay to acknowledge, I guess, to respond about how brave it was for the kid to say something at all. Share that, hey, I'm concerned about your safety and I want to make sure you're safe. This is one of those times that we are going to need to bring your parent in and let them know because they would never be okay if anything happened to you like this. Like, this is the primary reason that you're here. Increase those protective factors. And then with the family present, adult supervision, adequate supervision, the adult helps remove the lethal access, not goes through their room and tears it up, finding all those things, because then it becomes a game. It's more like you go with your parent and show them all the places you hid your stash of whatever it is incredibly powerful. And warn them about the disinhibiting effects of alcohol and drugs. Okay. And keep going, actually. This is just some information about office management safety, just to be thinking about it. What happens in your practice, keep hitting it, actually, a couple more. How to explain, actually, when do you talk about confidentiality? When do you break it? Developing a safety plan, like in your office, is there a room that is like lower kind of stimulation or kind of like a way off to the side in case the person's upset? Reducing risk, increasing supervision. Who is an MA going to go in the room if you identify a kid that has active suicidality that you're concerned about? How are you going to keep them one-to-one, never alone in the room? And just frequent check-ins. And when you do it at home, like having the parent frequently check in, having them come over and say, are you okay? Are you okay? Every 5 minutes is like really irritating to adolescents. And then you have the team come up with what the parent can do to check in. Often it's texting, often it's just like a look or a word, or even a little bit scary, but it worked for this kid, was a journal where the kid would write in the journal. Now the parent had to make sure they looked because that can sometimes be missed, but there's different ways that the parent and child can communicate to help say that, hey, I'm not okay right now. I just need to sit in the room with you. Next. Last slide. So thinking about these key elements, what are the warning signs and triggers that these thoughts are going to happen? And if they say, I don't know, okay, well then talk about the last time it happened. What was going on? What was happening? The situation that triggered it. What do you do? What can you do in those moments? Like, what are you realistically going to do in those moments? Because walking away after a fight with your parents usually doesn't end well. So what can you do? You can go to your room. You can do something else. You can distract yourself with music. These are all those healthy coping skills and problem solving is happening. Coming up with a home safety plan, identifying family, friends, community supports that are available, connecting these kids is incredibly protective and powerful. Connecting them with peers, positive peers, connecting them with people who believe in them and actually helping them take care of something else is also incredibly therapeutic. And here are some crisis resources that are available throughout the country, because I know we're in all different parts of Ohio today. And then, steps to use when you're in a crisis. The Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale is a fantastic tool that is easy to put into EMRs and easy to administer. And then it helps you decide, does this kid need to go to the emergency room, or can we do this, like keep them safe, get them home, and then get them connected to care quickly. And it's less traumatic for the kids. thank you so much for your attention. And I have some extra slides in here that you 100% don't have to go through, but it actually has a lot of the GLAD PC guidelines in there about the guidelines for adolescent depression in primary care. So these are just kind of a brief overview. Thank you. I went
Emily,
over just a
thank you
couple.
so much. That was fantastic.
Thanks.
Obviously, a lot of information and very timely. I worked 3 days in the office before coming up to Columbus, and all 3 of those days, at least 50% of my patients were coming in for a mental health issue. So, something that as we've learned, we're seeing and we continue to see. For time's sake, we're not going to have a sort of an official question and answer session right now. We're going to continue to move on with our program. We may be able to answer some of the questions via the chat box from our speakers. And then also at the end, in addition to receiving all of the slides from our presentations, there will be a follow-up document with all of the questions that you all have asked in the chat, along with all of the answers. So those will be sent out in the next week or so. All right, while I'm introducing our next speaker, I'm going to just ask everybody, if you want, you don't have to do this, but if you just want to maybe stand up, stretch, do the hokey pokey, turn yourself around, just kind of get up for a second. We've been sitting for a while, and we will continue on with our program. Before I introduce Danny, I did want to thank all of you that during the course of this meeting so far have gone online and signed the Stewart Safe Pledge. Thank you, and that link will continue to be in the chat box. If you haven't had a chance to do so, please do, and that will allow you to unlock resources for your patients, your students, your clients today. Okay, we're going to move along to a very timely and much needed advocacy update from Danny Hurley. Danny brings a wealth of legislative and budgetary knowledge from both the United States Congress and the Ohio General Assembly. A graduate of The Ohio State University, Danny began his career working for former U.S. Senator George Voinovich. Following 3 years in the senator's Columbus office, the Dayton native moved to Washington, D.C., where he continued his career with Voinovich. Following the senator's retirement from the Senate in 2011, Danny returned to Ohio to work for State Senator and Finance Chairman Chris Widner. Danny was a lead policy staffer during markup of last year's operating budget and this year's mid-biennium review. A self-described budget nerd, Danny is a policy-focused, research-intensive advocate and lobbyist. And as many of you know, has been really the lobbyist for our chapter and just done amazing work for both the chapter, pediatricians, and kids in the state of Ohio. Again, if you have any questions or comments during the session, please use the chat box. We will try to answer them throughout. And then again, we will send a follow-up question and answer. Danny, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, good morning, everyone. You can go ahead and jump to the next slide. Nice to be with you all. I guess good afternoon. Having that kind of day where you don't realize what time it is. As Dr. Pelletier said, I'm Danny Hurley from Capital Consulting Group. I have served as the lobbyist, or one of the lobbyists for Ohio AAP for 9, almost 10 years now. Next slide, please. And then actually a fun fact about the Ohio chapter is that you are the first client ever hired by Capital Consulting Group way back in 1994. So it's been a very long and very positive relationship, and we really do, both personally and professionally, we take great pride in working with you all. So just to dive right in, we are in the 134th Ohio General Assembly, the first session. Much like Congress, our General Assemblies run on a 2-year calendar. For this initial focus, or the initial session though, the main focus is the operating budget, which we're going to talk about. I'm sure you all saw in the news, but making headlines was recently the Ohio General Assembly, which is controlled by Republicans, voted to override the governor's veto of Senate Bill 22. Now this, again, was well reported, but this was legislation that will allow the Ohio General Assembly to vacate any public health orders issued by the governor or the director of the Department of Health. Also places some limits on the governor's ability to declare public health emergencies, mostly around the duration of those emergencies. So this was something that the governor has been fighting with his own party on. He vetoed it at the request of child health advocates, including AAP and children's hospitals. Unfortunately, the votes were there to override the veto, and that will actually take effect in June. So depending on where we're at with COVID, if things have not stabilized or if we're seeing surge in the variants, this could become a problem if the General Assembly decides to go in and rescind, the mask mandate or some of the social distancing requirements that are in effect. So I touch on there, growing disagreement between DeWine and the legislature, which is, the governor, if you followed his term in office much, he has been a really good champion for Ohio kids, and he has done a lot to help us and to support us. We have an excellent working relationship with the governor and his team. So, this rift between the governor and the legislature, it certainly gives us some rough waters to navigate. Also, I just note on there, we did see sort of an expanded focus on healthcare policy in the Ohio House of Representatives. Specifically, 2 new committees were created: the House Committee on Behavioral Health and Recovery Supports, and the House Aging Family and Human Services Committee. So, more legislators involved in issues that are important to us, and certainly more of an audience for our priorities. Looking at the political landscape really quick, we have new legislative maps that are going to be drawn later this year. That will be in effect for the 2022 election. So this is actually creating a lot of uncertainty and political intrigue in Ohio as far as what are the maps for Congress and the General Assembly going to look like for the next election. Finally, going back to this rift the governor has with his party, is we do anticipate the governor having a primary challenger. In talking to a lot of different political operatives, I don't think anyone really believes it's going to be a credible challenger, but it's certainly going to put the governor in an uncomfortable position of having to defend his handling of the coronavirus to members of his own party. Next slide, please. This is probably a little bit rudimentary for you all, but just a very brief structure of state government, just to level set. We have a legislative branch, the Ohio General Assembly. It has a House and a Senate, similar to Congress. We have 99 members in our House of Representatives, currently 65 Republicans and 34 Democrats. The current House Speaker is Bob Cupp from Lima. Members of the House are elected to 2-year terms, and we do have a term limit in Ohio of 8 years or 4 terms for House members. Over in the Senate, we have 33 members. Again, you see a strong Republican majority there, 25 Republicans and 8 Democrats. State Senator Matt Huffman, also from Lima. I do believe this is the first time in Ohio history that the leaders of both chambers have been from the same town. They actually live about 4 blocks from each other, so they're very good friends, which is helpful. The Senate is elected to 4-year terms. Those terms are staggered every 2 years. And again, you have the same 8-year term limits, except that's 2 Senate terms. First time in history, we actually have 3 physicians in the Ohio General Assembly. There are 2 senators, Terry Johnson and Steve Huffman, as well as a pediatrician in the House, a Democrat from here in Columbus, Beth Liston. So exciting time. We have some real subject matter experts. And of course, having a pediatrician in the House has just been really helpful in terms of introducing a lot of science and medicine and good child health facts into the debates. Our executive branch, we have a governor and the statewide office holders. So your lieutenant governor, attorney general, auditor, secretary of state, and treasurer of state. We do have a two-term limits. So that's 8 years total for those as well. And of course, the governor can appoint his cabinet with advice and consent of the Senate. So that's, your director of Medicaid, director of the Department of Health, and others. Lastly, and probably a branch of government I certainly hope we don't have to pay attention to, is the judicial branch. So we have an Ohio Supreme Court. There are 7 justices, currently 4 Republicans and 3 Democrats. The Chief Justice, Maureen O'Connor, is currently leading, although she is going to be termed out. Interestingly, in the Ohio Supreme Court, we don't have a term limit, we have an age limit. And once you hit age 70, you are ineligible to run for re-election. So you serve a 6-year term, but after you cross that 70 threshold, basically when your term expires, you're off the court. So kind of an interesting little judicial tidbit there. Next slide, please. All right, so let's talk about the state operating budget. We budget on a 2-year cycle. So this budget, House Bill 110, will cover the next 2 state fiscal years. That's July 1st of this year through June 30th, 2023. The governor unveiled his budget proposal in March. It actually just passed the House this week. Happy to report that on the child health front, the governor included a continuation of all the different child health investments that were in his previous budget, that's House Bill 166, as well as stable funding for the Ohio Department of Medicaid, including sustaining the work of Medicaid to rebid and redesign its managed care program. We're going to talk more about that later. So all in all, this budget, unlike, if you've heard my updates before on the budget, they've certainly been much more pessimistic. And even as, as far back as last year, at the height of the pandemic, we were very worried about state revenues because of some of the economic shutdowns. But actually, Ohio's tax revenues have been pretty resilient. And combine that with the fact that we do have a very friendly administration, we're not seeing a lot of panic in this budget. So that's definitely a departure from some of the budgets, even from 4 years ago, when we were really fighting just to keep Medicaid intact. Now we actually get to see new investments in Medicaid and some new child health initiatives under Medicaid and Department of Health that are really exciting. Another just interesting piece of policy in the budget is where we are actually the only state, if you believe this, that does not license hospitals. We license units within hospitals, and hospitals do have to register with the state, but technically we don't have a hospital licensure. The budget creates one, so we would actually become then the 50th state to have hospital licensure. It's phased in over the next 3 years. Those of you that work in hospitals, you might catch wind of this. It's largely going to be an administrative kind of function, but that is something that's going to change the regulatory landscape in Ohio. The House, in their markup, they added a significant school funding reform proposal that will, a small part of that very big pot of money will be directing more money into school health services. So that is certainly a positive for those of you that have partnerships or provide care to your local school districts. You'll hopefully see some more resources coming down there. They did propose a 2% across the board income tax cut. In the grand scheme of things, that's not a huge amount of money, but certainly, that's the priority for the General Assembly. Again, largely left Medicaid alone, so we don't have any red alert. We need to get you all engaged kind of issues in the budget. The Senate has already begun their consideration of the budget, and they will pass it in early June. And the budget must be signed by June 30th, mostly because the fiscal year starts the next day. So, barring any, really bizarre changes, I think this is going to be a relatively painless budget. Can we go to the next slide, please? And so these are the priorities that we have. So kind of our advocacy issues that we're working on. The first one, actually, if you picked up the paper this morning, if you live in Cleveland or Columbus, you may have seen this. So back in 2013, I believe, when we had the Oberfell v. Hodges decision, one of the sort of ancillary outcomes of that decision was that same-sex couples are allowed to adopt. Now, that's very consistent with a longstanding AAP policy around adoption and other rights for same-sex parents. State law has not caught up with that. So in Ohio now, a same-sex couple can adopt. So this is not an issue of changing how those couples are treated. But the problem is, if you go back and look at state law, it still uses the phrase husband and wife. In the governor's as introduced budget, they changed that to legally married couple, again, just so the statute was aligned with contemporary judicial precedent. Unfortunately, the House, at the behest of some of the more conservative-minded members, removed this and reverted back to husband and wife. Functionally, I just want to stress, this does not change who can adopt in Ohio, but it does two things. One is it creates confusion between what is currently allowed in Ohio and what the Ohio Revised Code says. The other is, and just to be very candid with you all, this sends a very, I think, negative message to that community. So I know there are a number of advocates that are working on changing this in the Senate. I know we are going to be working on this as well. It's as we're going to talk about on later slides, there are some other issues kind of in the broader LGBTQ space that are really, I think, going to become major issues for us. But this is something that, from an adoption standpoint, this is creating consistency and clearing up any confusion and sending a message that, which I think is consistent with AAP's policy statement, that children are best served by two-parent households, and really, it doesn't matter what the gender of those parents are. Kids benefit from having two parents. So we are also working on an amendment to lower the age of eligibility for the Ohio Quit Line. This is the tobacco cessation hotline managed by the Ohio Department of Health. Right now, they are not allowed to take calls from anyone under the age of 18. We want to take that down to 14. And really the goal there is just to provide adolescents who may be vaping or maybe considering using cigarettes, to give them a resource to go and to get some counseling and get a referral to some help. The quit line, there's no prescription or none of those kinds of issues. It's really just support for people who are considering quitting or who have questions. So I think that's a really positive change to really try to do something small but impactful for adolescent smoking and vaping. We are supportive of a House added amendment that deals with newborn screening. So in Ohio, let me backtrack. I guess a few years ago, RUSP, so the, oh gosh, I'm going to blank on the name, Recommended Uniform Screening Procedures Committee, recommended adding screenings for SMA and ADL to the newborn screening panel. Those have actually not been implemented in Ohio yet. A big reason for that is COVID and the state lab converting to doing COVID tests. So it's not that the Department of Health doesn't want these screened in Ohio, it's just that they haven't had the lab capacity to accommodate that. So they're working on this, but separately from that, there's an amendment that was put into the House that will do two things. One is it will explicitly add those two screenings. So maybe nudge ODH a bit to get this done. The other is it would set a timeline. So when new screenings are added to the RUSP in the future, that it would start an automatic clock by which they have to be implemented in Ohio. And while this is a rare situation, I think we just want to make sure that as newborn screening evolves, that we're not falling behind, because we have seen that with SMA and ADL. Again, it's COVID related, but still we want to make sure that we don't lose sight of those really important newborn screenings. So that's an amendment that we're supportive of. Last budget amendment we're working on, this one has a lot of different people supporting it, would be to expand the eligibility of the Children with Medical Handicaps program under the Department of Health up to age 26. Currently, it cuts off when you turn 21. So all those young adults that are aging out of CMH coverage that have complex medical needs, we're going to start giving them more coverage so they can keep that up to age 26. Obviously, that's a time when they can still be on their parents' health insurance plan. And for a lot of young adults, I mean, that's when you're first starting out in your career. And we're just hoping to give them a little bit of extra support to just keep things going till they can get off on their own and be a little more independent. As I've already made clear, in general, fewer issues than past budgets, which is a relief. Unfortunately, there are a lot, as we'll talk about in future slides, there's a lot of other issues keeping us busy, but we can say, comfortably, this is not the worst budget we've seen in our time. So next slide, please. So Department of Medicaid, I know my past few updates to this group, we've talked a lot about this new managed care redesign that's coming out. So when Governor DeWine first took office back in 2019, it was sorry if you hear dogs barking, by the way, I think the mail just arrived. In 2019, when the governor first came in and Maureen Corcoran took over the Department of Medicaid, they announced plans to rebid all of the managed care contracts and to really redesign the entire system, which is the first time it's really been comprehensively updated since 2011. So we're on a 10-year-old system, basically. And over the last 2 years, there have been different requests for information where Ohio AAP and others have submitted comments to the department on what we'd like to see in the new managed care system. There have been a lot of different virtual and in-person forums and a lot of conversation. And then really in the last 2 months, we got the first real glimpse of what the new system is going to look like because all of the winning vendors have been announced. So this new system the anticipated launch date is January 2022. There is potential for that to be delayed if there's any kind of litigation, which just that will likely be the case. I mean, this is a $20 billion worth of contracts going to these vendors, and there are vendors that didn't get awards, and they're gonna want to challenge that. So beginning hopefully in January 2022 for Ohio Medicaid, which serves half of Ohio kiddos, here are the new managed care plans: United, Molina, and CareSource, which are current managed care plans, so they're staying on. And then the new market entrants are going to be Humana, Anthem, and AmeriHealth Caritas. As of now, Paramount did not get renewed. And Buckeye, the decision on Buckeye Healthcare, which is run by Centene, was deferred because they're the subject of an investigation by the Ohio Attorney General. So Buckeye is kind of in the bubble right now. But there were several plans, Medical Mutual and others, that did not get contracts that, as I note, today is the day to file protests. I my understanding is they are all planning to file protests. And then from there, depending on whether or not the department reverses any decisions, they might seek litigation. These are going to be statewide plans. I know at some point they'd envisioned doing regional plans or allowing plans to bid on a certain region, but these winning bidders all bid to be statewide plans. So we're not going to have to worry about different regions. Joining these new managed care plans will be a single statewide pharmacy benefit manager that they will all have to use, and that is going to be run by Gainwell Technologies. So, under the current system, every managed care plan has their own PBM. Most of them use CareSource, but the department is going to be pulling pharmacy basically out of the purview of the managed care plans and having a single PBM they all have to work with. The other role for Gainwell Technologies, they actually won a second contract to be the single state fiscal intermediary. And this is going to be, I think, a really good thing for providers. So once this new fiscal intermediary goes live, all of your claims and all of your prior authorization requests will go through the fiscal intermediary. So you won't have to worry about, okay, is this Medicaid patient under United or under Molina or under Humana? You'll send your claim and your prior auth request to the fiscal intermediary, which is going to be Gainwell Technologies, and they will actually then take care of going to the appropriate managed care plan, getting the the claim paid or the prior authorization approved, and then sending that back to you. So it's going to eliminate, I think, a lot of administrative headaches in terms of figuring out which plan you're supposed to reach out to. Other vendors that are being brought in, there's a completely new benefit program called Ohio Rise that's going to be really impactful for kids. It's going to be run by Aetna Better Health. And what this is a basically for children with significant behavioral health needs. This is going to be a statewide network of providers and facilities that will basically serve these kids. So it's going to be behavioral health treatment above and beyond what traditional Medicaid offers. There are about 60,000 kids that are expected to be covered under Ohio Rise. So, these are children, again, with a lot of just need for behavioral health, multi-system youth, and populations like that. So very excited to see that launching. And I think that's something that that's going to be really impactful for kids. Lastly, and interestingly, I think, is a pharmacy pricing and audit consultant. And this is a firm called Myers and Stauffer. So Medicaid will be using this vendor to do really two major things. The first is to provide some level of oversight over the single state PBM. We know over the past 2 years that there have been a lot of media reports around waste by some of the PBMs serving Ohio Medicaid. Some estimates are that's as much as $200 or $300 million in basically money that was given to PBMs that was not ultimately given to providers to care for patients. The other thing the pharmacy pricing and audit consultant will do is help Medicaid manage their preferred drug list. So you all may know that beginning this calendar year, we moved to a single statewide PDL or preferred drug list. So really important for patients who are maybe relying on prescription drugs, people with diabetes, asthma, hemophilia, and other conditions. So for those of you that work in Medicaid that maybe have kids that are enrolled and you've had problems with Medicaid coverage in the past, this is actually going to be an interesting vendor for us because it may create some opportunities to move the needle a bit on Medicaid prescription drug coverage. One of the things we're focused on now that these vendors are all public is really meeting with these vendors and sharing our perspectives, sharing our resources, making sure we have a relationship with them so that when they throw the switch on this new thing next year, A, we've played a role in how they design the system, and B, we want to make sure that as issues come up, we have a way to quickly get responses. So a big focus of our meetings with Medicaid and with the vendors is going to be just creating those connections and playing a role in benefit design. So those of you that deal with a lot of Medicaid patients, I know we've asked a lot of feedback from you, but if you have thoughts on how you'd like to see these programs come out, please reach out to us because that's what we want to lead with, is what you all need this new system to do for you. Next slide, please. So let's talk about some legislative issues. And first, and probably most impactful, are immunization issues and kind of COVID-19 public health issues. I touched on Senate Bill 22 already, which was kind of the anti-DeWine bill that was enacted over the governor's veto. So that'll take effect in June, and we'll see what, if anything, the General Assembly is going to do with their newfound authority then. Probably the biggest issue we have on the anti-vaccine front is House Bill 248. This was recently introduced by State Representative Jennifer Gross, who's a freshman from Southwest Ohio. She is also a licensed nurse practitioner. And what this bill would do is it would make, a number of really, really concerning changes to Ohio's immunization laws. Under current law for the school-based and child care center immunizations, it's, the exemptions are medical, religious, and philosophical, which is, if you kind of look around other states, only I think 15 or 16 states allow those exemptions. Of that, Ohio is one of only 8 states, I think I note there in parentheses, that actually allows you to claim an exemption without any kind of documentation. For example, in Kentucky, you can claim a religious or a philosophical exemption, but there's actually a form you have to have filled out by a healthcare provider. Same in Michigan. So we don't even have that in Ohio. You can basically say, I don't want to immunize my kids. You, the parent, sign the form, send it back to the school, and that's the only record we get. So already our immunization system in Ohio is not ideal. What House Bill 248 would do is amazingly, it would broaden that. So it would say for any vaccine requirement, whether it's a school, it's a state requirement for school or child care entry, a requirement that a hospital has for employees to be immunized against the flu, any vaccine requirement, you have to accept any exemption that's, if the patient claims medical contraindication, if the patient claims they have natural immunity, or if they have religious or philosophical beliefs. The big departure on that is the natural immunity, but also there's no requirement that a physician attest to these. So under current law, if you claim a medical contraindication, you have to have a letter from your doctor saying, yes, this person cannot be immunized. You don't even have to do that under this bill. You can say, oh, I have a medical issue, I can't be immunized, or oh, I already had that, I'm naturally immune. And there's nothing that can be done to counter that. The other thing that the bill says is you can verbally or in writing claim your exemption. The employer or the provider or whoever has to accept your exemption however you want to deliver it. So, if you're a parent, you can now call your child's school and say, I'm not having my kids immunized because they have a medical issue. Hang the phone up, and you've now complied with House Bill 248. The other thing it does is it applies all of these to employers. So those of you that work in hospitals know you have to have a flu vaccine, most likely. This would not take away the ability of the hospital to mandate that, but it would grant these very broad exemptions. The other thing it does is it prohibits employers, in this case hospitals, for any patients that refuse the flu vaccine, you cannot require them to wear masks in clinical settings or maybe move them temporarily from a clinical to more of an administrative setting. So if you have a NICU nurse that doesn't want to get the flu vaccine, the hospital cannot take that NICU nurse off the NICU, which is really concerning. This bill is really being pushed by the anti-vaccine community. Our understanding from just some preliminary conversations is it is intended to focus on the COVID vaccine. But my counter to that is, well, if you wanted to focus on the COVID vaccine, you should say COVID once in your bill. It is very broad. This, I do not think there is another state with a more lax immunization law if this were to be enacted. Very big fight on our hands. The one thing I'll say is I'm not overly concerned this is going to get traction and take off. But what this is going to do is it's going to bring all the crazy people out, and it's going to force us to spend a lot of time, educating legislators on the very basics of immunizations and really trying to, trying to convince them that what we are doing is the right thing. Another bill we're watching that's not as urgent is Representative Catrona's bill that would prohibit the state from requiring vaccine passports. That's not something Ohio or really any state is looking at doing, but this is something that's caught on. The one issue with this, though, is it could impact how we report COVID-19 vaccination status to the state registry. So that's more of a practical issue I don't think is intended. Obviously, we want to utilize our state immunization database, so that's important. Pharmacist vaccination. So a few years back, we agreed to allow pharmacists to give immunizations to children age 13 and up or 7 and up with a prescription. This was part of a broader compromise to get us back to having a daycare immunization mandate. But the pharmacists are trying to get in 7 and up without a prescription. So that's a more of a scope of practice issue that we're just going to have to push back on, because that would really impact our well child visits negatively. Next slide. So the next slide is where we're advancing. Here we go. Transgender issues. So this is a really difficult set of issues to talk about, and it's pretty frustrating to see the bills that are moving, the bills that are not moving. But let's just jump into this real quick. So we have a pair of companion bills that are they're dubbed the Save Women Sports Acts, and you've seen these in a number of states. And what they basically do is they prohibit transgender females participating in women's sports at the recreational, college, high school, any level in Ohio. So really, not an issue that needs to be addressed in Ohio by any means, but really, sending a very negative message to that community. So those bills have been introduced. They are not moving with any great urgency, but as you've seen in other states, whether it's Arkansas or Missouri or others, this is an issue that has a lot of support from kind of the religious and conservative advocates. And so we have a lot of those groups in Ohio. On the flip side of the debate, though, a very positive bill is companion bills, House Bill 208, Senate Bill 119, that would add sexual orientation and gender identity to the Ohio Civil Rights Law. So we have a bill that's really discriminatory, and we have a bill that's really good. So obviously we'd like to see one of those pass and not the other. The other thing we are aware of is there is a bill that would prohibit any kind of gender affirming medical treatment or treatment to minors. We know, I think Akron Children's, Nationwide Children's, and Cincinnati Children's all have gender affirming clinics. And this would basically prohibit about 90% of what they do. So this is again, a very difficult bill. This is actually basically what passed in Arkansas. That was the legislature there voted to override the governor's veto, I think 2 weeks ago. Next slide, please. Practice of medicine issues. So House Bill 160, this is the latest iteration of the healthcare price transparency bill. I could spend 45 minutes talking about the healthcare price transparency debate in Ohio. I mean, Ohio AAP has been party to lawsuits on this and everything else. It's been a really big mess. This is the latest iteration of it. Effectively, the bill will require anytime a patient schedules a visit or a procedure or a test, within 24 hours of that being scheduled, you have to provide the patient with a cost estimate that shows not only your charges, but insurance reimbursement and out-of-pocket costs. It's price transparency is well-intentioned, but this is simply not doable. So we're going to have to work on this bill. It's something where we partner with OSMA and the hospitals and a number of other groups to really try to get to a place where we can have a law we can comply with. I think, functionally, if any of your patients ask for a cost estimate, you'd probably find a way to accommodate them. But making it mandatory in a very aggressive timeline is just is beyond unrealistic. House Bill 122, so telehealth, obviously something that we've been using a lot the last year with the pandemic. This bill would do two things. It would codify the recent expansion of telehealth coverage under Medicaid. So those of you that work with Medicaid know we've had pretty good telehealth coverage over the past year. This would make that permanent. The other thing it would do is it would expand Ohio's telehealth parity law, which currently covers services by physicians, but it would actually cover a number of other advanced practice and skilled therapy providers. So again, just really looking to push telehealth out into the community, and I think that's a positive. We do have we have one in every General Assembly, but this year it's House Bill 221, sponsored by Representative Brinkman, whose daughter is a nurse practitioner, and Representative Gross, who is herself a nurse practitioner. It's what we call a pathway to practice model. So under the bill, APRNs would be allowed to practice without a collaboration agreement after 12 months or 2,000 hours of supervised practice. It was just introduced, but we know that this is going to be a big fight for the physician community. And then lastly, Senate Bill 6. This actually just passed the the Ohio Senate this week, but it would enter Ohio into the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact. If enacted, what that would mean for all of you licensed Ohio physicians is any other compact state, which I think is every state that borders Ohio and about 35 states nationally, you could actually get expedited licensure in those states. So this would basically, if you're at a hospital near the border and you want to be able to practice across the border, or if you just want to do telehealth, or if maybe you spend half a year in Ohio, half a year somewhere else, This gives you a little more flexibility in terms of how you can practice medicine. Next slide, please. So health insurance and prescription drug issues, not as high on our list of priorities, but for those of you that work with families and populations that are dependent on prescription drugs, this is really important. So the first one, House Bill 135, would prohibit health plans from using what we call copay accumulator programs. And what this basically is in a nutshell is for patients, say you have a patient that has hemophilia and they're getting a discount, a copay assistance card from the manufacturer to use whatever drug they're on. What health plans have started doing is they will accept that as to pay for the copay at the counter, but they don't actually apply it then to the patient's deductible. So after the patient exhausts that copay assistance, they go to the pharmacy counter thinking they've exhausted their deductible, and all of a sudden they're stuck paying, $4,000 or $5,000 out of pocket. So this would really try to make sure that copay assistance, whether it's from the manufacturer, from a charity, from a family member, applies to the patient's deductible. House Bill 153, a similar bill that would prohibit any kind of mid-year drug coverage or copay changes. We call these, call this non-medical switching. So if you have a patient that's on a drug, maybe they have epilepsy and they're on a drug to control that, all of a sudden the health plan drops it from preferred status and they lose access to it. So we want to prevent that from happening. I mentioned the CMH change already, but just so you know, that's also a standalone bill. So if we're not successful in the budget and increasing that age, we do have a standalone bill that we can push as well. Then lastly, not an issue I think is probably very impactful for pediatricians, but House Bill 193 is legislation that was introduced. It would prohibit or require, only electronic prescriptions for Schedule II drugs. I don't think many doctors are still writing prescriptions on paper, and I certainly don't think they're writing Schedule IIs on paper, but that's a bill that is out there that I would anticipate passing this year. Next slide, please. All right, and this I think is my last slide. I know oh, go back one. There we go. Injury prevention. So a handful of bills here that we're working on. House Bill 9, this is a bill we've talked about before. It would prohibit the sale of over-the-counter drugs that contain dextromethorphan to minors. The biggest impediment to this historically has been there was a pharmacist who was a member of the Ohio Senate who did not like this bill. He's now gone, and so this bill appears to be ready to pass. And so we're hopeful to see that get across the finish line this year. I know we've had pediatricians and some other folks routinely testify on this. House Bill 159, again, another issue that's been around for a few years, would prohibit tanning by individuals under the age of 18 without parental consent. Another bill that we, along with the Ohio State Medical Association and the Dermatology Association, have supported. Again, these issues are perennial. We have a fireworks bill in Ohio. Actually, the House just passed House Bill 170, or the House Commerce and Labor Committee just passed House Bill 172 this week, which is, legalized fireworks discharge in the state of Ohio. We're one of only 3 states that does not allow discharge. So it's an issue we're going to keep fighting. And then lastly, and we're still evaluating this bill because it just got introduced this week. So State Representatives Miranda and Kelly, so 2 Democrats from the Cincinnati area, introduced a bill that does 2 things, one of which is actually something we've advocated for a few years now. It creates a tax credit for the purchase of firearms storage devices. This sort of fits in nicely with our Store It Safe campaign. The other thing it does, but it's probably going to make the bill a harder lift, is it increases the penalties for negligent storage of a firearm. So if you're a parent, you don't have your weapon stored properly, your child finds it and injures himself or herself or somebody else, it increases the penalties for that. So negligent discharge of a firearm. Again, that's probably gonna draw the ire of the Second Amendment community in Ohio, which is, very, very loud and very well organized. But the tax credit piece, I think, has real potential. So we are certainly going to want to take a look at that and see if we can make that part of our Store It Safe campaign and our advocacy on firearm safety. With that, I don't know if we're taking questions yet, but I do have questions on slide here if anyone has any.
Danny, thanks. There are a couple of questions, and we actually do have a couple of minutes before we move on. So I'm going to sort of 2 questions related to the new managed Medicaid plans. One was, about CareSource, and as you know, in Southwest Ohio, CareSource pretty much has a monopoly on managed care. And Dr. Hardy was wondering, she had recalled hearing at some point that managed Medicaid, those patients may get redistributed more outside of CareSource into other managed care plans. Have you heard if that's a possibility or not, or will the families just choose who they want to go with?
So the simple answer is CareSource is going to lose. CareSource is going to likely lose some of their caseload. They're about 80% of the Medicaid managed care market in Ohio right now. So 80% of individuals that get their coverage under managed care and Medicaid are in CareSource. The department is not going to set they're not going to say, okay, we have 6 plans, everyone gets 16% of coverage, whatever the percentage is. They're not going to do that. But what they are probably going to do is if a plan starts to have too much of a market share in a certain region or statewide, they're probably going to cap enrollment. So individuals can choose their plan, but if everyone stays on care, or everyone wants to go back to CareSource, there's probably going to be a point where the department's going to say, okay, we're going to cap it and make people go to other plans. Because up until recently, for example, with the single preferred drug list, prior to that, if you wanted to get good coverage for a drug on Medicaid, you went to CareSource because that's 80% of the population right there. So yes, CareSource is likely going to lose some ground, but we'll have to see how that rolls out. But the department,
that's an issue for those of us in the Southwest Cincinnati area, because most of the practices that actually do, have a managed care contract, many of us just have CareSource. So thank you. And then sort of related to that, do you know if Gainwell Technologies, as the fiscal intermediary, will have a centralized database for all of the managed care companies?
A centralized database,
In other words, I think because they're managing the pharmacy benefits, correct, or will be?
Yes.
So will it be sort of one website or one central spot where if you're involved in all the managed care plans that you would then, I would assume, go to sort of help figure out the pharmacy benefits?
Yes. So a couple things on that. So first off, under the new Medicaid managed care system, we're going to have centralized credentialing. So you will not have to go to each individual managed care plan to get credentialed. Once you're a Medicaid credentialed provider, you will automatically be in all managed care plans. As it relates to that portal, yes, the IT side of it, it'll be a single portal you'll go to. In terms of prescription drug coverage, so 2 things that are going to be heavily standardized. First is going to be the actual prescription drug list. So what drugs are covered? What's the step therapy? Is there a prior auth requirement? That's going to be standardized across all 5 plans. The other thing that's going to be standardized is the actual prior authorization process and forms. So sort of keeping in line with this idea of a single fiscal intermediary, when you go to submit that prior auth, it will be uniform no matter what the plan is. And the response and the coverage of that drug is going to be uniform no matter which plan it is. So I don't know if that answers the question, but uniformity is going to be the key here for the department. And that was a big theme. If you go back to the comments we submitted, back in 2019, that was a big theme that we had was, there's too much ambiguity in terms of how prior authorizations are handled. And when can you connect someone on the phone? When can you get the peer-to-peer review? All of those issues we have stressed to the department. There needs to be uniformity if you're going to have this big system, this $20 billion system with all these different plans. It's got to be easier for our folks to navigate. So.
Great, thank you very much. I know there may be 1 or 2 more questions, and we will get those answered after this event and get those mailed out. And I know many of you already have, but if you want to, if this has sort of sparked you and you want to become active and engaged, please join up for our Peds on Call to sort of know when we need you to help mobilize, when we need your voices. We're going to take a break in just a minute, but Danny did a fantastic job of sort of giving an update on the state, I just wanted to just do a very brief recap. For those of you that may not know, the National AAP Advocacy Conference took place earlier this month. It was, of course, virtual. We didn't get to go to DC, but we had over 750 pediatricians attend. Next slide, please. And from that 750, we had almost 40 pediatricians, as well as half of them were trainees. So we had medical students, residents, and fellows. It was fantastic. We had 2 days of keynotes and workshops on how to be effective social media communicators, how to be effective advocators. And then this is a photo of a screenshot from our meeting with one of the staffers from Senator Brown's office. And then we also got to meet with Senator Portman's office. And then we broke up into smaller groups and we met with our district, our House representatives. Next slide, please. And what we were talking about, what we were advocating, and I wanted to make you all aware of this, and it has to do, there's a lot going on with vaccines in Ohio, but also nationally, which will affect kids in Ohio, is the introduction of the Strengthening the Vaccine for Children's Program Act of 2021, which is a bipartisan bill that was originally introduced by Representative Kim Schreier, who, as many of you know, is the first pediatrician in Congress. At the time we did this conference, there were 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans in the House that had co-sponsored. And in the Senate, the matching bill in the Senate, there was 1 Democrat. We were looking for co-sponsor, a Republican co-sponsor. Since then, several other representatives and senators have come on to co-sponsor this bill. In a sense, what it does is basically it strengthens the VFC program. So these are just some of the highlights of the bill. It really is looking to ensure adequate access to vaccines under the VFC program. And by offering an incentive payment of up to $10,000 spread out over 2 years for pediatricians and family physicians that participate in the VFC program to help offset some of that administrative and financial burden as far as having separate refrigerators, time, those sorts of things. It's going to expand the definition of federally vaccine eligible children. Big key of this is a minimum payment requirement for vaccine administration services that really will try to make the vaccine administration fees 2 things. Number 1, comparable, equal to Medicare, which is much higher than what we get paid under Medicaid rates. The other thing is those of you that participate in the VFC program know that you can only charge for 1 vaccine administration fee, even if you're doing multi-antigen vaccines like Pentacell or MMRV. This bill would allow for billing and payment for those multiple admin fees. There's also some money for helping to cover vaccine counseling, especially under vaccine hesitancy. And then it also would put a little bit more burden for funding on the federal government by increasing the FMAP. So my plea to you is, in addition to reaching out, there was some active chatter to your state representatives about these state specific issues, please reach out to Senator Brown and Senator Portman, as well as your congressional representative, to ask them to co-sponsor this very, very important bill, and why it's so important that the VFC program is strengthened and why it's important. Next slide, please. And that may be my last slide, I think. So, oh, no, I do want to say I think just after having sort of hearing that advocacy update from Danny, we were very lucky to have Stacey Abrams be our keynote speaker on the 2nd day. And I really she encouraged us that, when we're doing what we do as pediatricians, 3 things. And I think, we sort of have hit all of this today already. So educate, advocate, and look, sometimes you have to agitate. And I think some of the issues that Danny brought up, look, we're going to have to agitate a little bit, but we're up for it. And we appreciate all of your support as we fight for kids in Ohio. With that, we're going to take a break, about a 10-minute break. We're going to come back at 2:30. Please come back for sort of the debut of the exciting launch of the rebranded Ohio Champions for Vaccines. Couple other messages, please continue to follow us on social media. I've been trying to live tweet the meeting as we go, as well as the chapter. And again, going back through the chat, there are several links on ways that you can help support the chapter, which ultimately support the health of kids in Ohio. For supporting our Put a Lid on It bike helmet safety program, going to buy raffle tickets if you can't attend in person to Goofy Golf. So there's the information right there. And we will see you all back at 2:30 to hear all about Ohio Champions for Vaccines.
One in 5 teens think about suicide. Suicide is the leading cause of death among Ohioans ages 10 to 14 and the second leading cause of death among Ohioans ages 15 to 34 and has increased by 60% over the past decade. 1 in 3 homes with children have a gun. Children as young as 3 can be strong enough to pull a 10-pound trigger. 85% of bicycle-related head injuries can be prevented with a helmet. 1 in 3 of Ohio's children are considered overweight or obese. Nearly 40% of high school seniors admitted to vaping at least once. 40% of Ohio's children are exposed to smoke at home, which can cause illness and even death. Only 66% of Ohio babies have received all recommended immunizations. Only 40% of Ohio's Medicaid children get the 2 required lead screenings. The COVID-19 pandemic has led to a significant drop in WellCare visits, which are crucial to monitoring growth and development and protecting against vaccine-preventable diseases. In fact, vaccines are down as much as 73%. But thanks to the Ohio AAP, there are pediatricians working hard every day to help change these pictures. The Stuart Safe Learning Collaborative will provide safety counseling, depression screening, and locked boxes to 1,000 families, along with resources to be spread throughout the state of Ohio over the next year. The Put a Lid on It program has donated 65,000 free helmets to children across Ohio over the past decade. 84,000 children have benefited from our Parenting at Mealtime and Playtime programs, nutrition and play materials. Through our regional vaping trainings and education, we have reached 500,000 teens with vaping prevention materials. Our Smoke-Free Families program reduced in-home smoke exposure by 47%. The Brush Book Bed program provided more than 4,000 young children with books. Ohio AAP immunization programs build coalitions and statewide partnerships to advocate for immunizations and address parental refusal to increase rates. The Childhood Lead Prevention Program is offering regional education and providing resources to increase lead testing for children in high-risk zip codes and those on Medicaid. Ohio AAP has been working to preserve and protect pediatrics during the COVID-19 pandemic by providing up-to-date news, information, and resources to our members and the families they serve.
The Ohio AAP educates, innovates, and advocates for all Ohio pediatricians to directly impact nearly 1 million children and their families each year. The Ohio AAP has more than 2,900 members and growing. The Ohio AAP advocates for children at the community and state level, educates by providing tangible and digital resources for pediatricians, families, and partners, engages pediatricians and partners in a collaborative network, guides pediatricians and families through trusted information on emergent pediatric issues, improves practice performance through enhanced reimbursement, transforms practices with evidence-based quality improvement and outcomes.
Thank you, Ohio AAP, for helping pediatricians so that they can help kids like me grow and achieve our dreams. 1 in 5 teens think about suicide. Suicide is the leading cause of death among Ohioans ages 10 to 14 and the second leading cause of death among Ohioans ages 15 to 34 and has increased by 60% over the past decade. 1 in 3 homes with children have a gun. Children as young as 3 can be strong enough to pull a 10-pound trigger. 85% of bicycle-related head injuries can be prevented with a helmet. 1 in 3 of Ohio's children are considered overweight or obese. Nearly 40% of high school seniors admitted to vaping at least once. 40% of Ohio's children are exposed to smoke at home, which can cause illness and even death. Only 66% of Ohio babies have received all recommended immunizations. Only 40% of Ohio's Medicaid children get the 2 required lead screenings. The COVID-19 pandemic has led to a significant drop One in 5 teens think about suicide. Suicide is the leading cause of death among Ohioans ages 10 to 14 and the second leading cause of death among Ohioans ages 15 to 34 and has increased by 60% over the past decade. 1 in 3 homes with children have a gun. Children as young as 3 can be strong enough to pull a 10-pound trigger. 85% of bicycle-related head injuries can be prevented with a helmet. 1 in 3 of Ohio's children are considered overweight or obese. Nearly 40% of high school seniors admitted to vaping at least once. 40% of Ohio's children are exposed to smoke at home, which can cause illness and even death. Only 66% of Ohio babies have received all recommended immunizations. Only 40% of Ohio's Medicaid children get the 2 required lead screenings. The COVID-19 pandemic has led to a significant drop in well care visits, which are crucial to monitoring growth and development and protecting against vaccine-preventable diseases. In fact, vaccines are down as much as 73%. But thanks to the Ohio AAP, there are pediatricians working hard every day to help change these pictures. The Stuart Safe Learning Collaborative will provide safety counseling, depression screening, and locked boxes to 1,000 families, along with resources to be spread throughout the state of Ohio over the next year. The Put a Lid on It program has donated 65,000 free helmets to children across Ohio. 1 in 5 teens.
We're done. All right, welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a nice break, and thanks for joining us. This is a very exciting time for the chapter. We are so excited to launch the rebranding of our Parents Advocating for Vaccine initiative. Vaccine health, as we've been talking over the last hour or so, is more important now than ever. And as you know, the Ohio chapter works tirelessly to educate and advocates to increase rates in Ohio. I'm going to introduce it to my friend and colleague, Dr. Denise Warwick, for this exciting launch. Dr. Warwick is a primary care pediatrician in Anderson Township, a suburb of Cincinnati. She is the associate medical director for pediatrics at TriHealth. She emphasizes preventative care measures in her practice, including regular well-child visits and immunizations. Partnering with patients and families on shared decision-making, she works closely with families to educate them on medical conditions and treatment plans that may affect their child. Dr. Warwick also enjoys teaching medical students and residents and is active in various advocacy efforts, both in her community and statewide. She serves as the current co-chair for what was formerly known as Parents Advocating for Vaccines. For the Ohio AAP chapter, she serves as a delegate at large to the board of directors and formerly served on our nominating committee. Outside of her practice, Dr. Warwick enjoys spending time with her husband, Steve, who's also a pediatrician, and her 2 young girls. Denise?
Thank you, Chris, for that nice introduction, and it's nice to see all of you today. So this is a very exciting time for us. So we've put a lot of hard work and effort into this over the past several years, and I think we're just renewing our vision for continued efforts moving forward. So next slide, please. So if you all would take a couple seconds and go to the link below for the Menti like you had saw earlier this morning. So we're going to try to ask to see what your thoughts are about one word you would think best describes your vision for advocacy for our chapter and for the Ohio Champions for Vaccine. So take a couple minutes to do that, please. Great, and we're seeing some thoughts come in already. Okay, so we see confidence, education, science, educate, trust. These are great, guys. All right, okay. Thanks, everybody. This is very helpful. Okay, all right, I think we can go back to our presentation. And there's some more coming in the chat, so great. Okay, so this is going to discuss our story as our transition from PA for V, or Parents Advocating for Vaccine, to our new coalition, which is Ohio Champions for Vaccine. Next slide, and you can start the video, please. Oh, and again, I have no conflicts of interest to disclose. Next slide. So while they're getting this queued up, this is a nice video to discuss kind of our transition and how this story all began. We're having some technical issues with the video, I'm assuming. It can take just a couple seconds here. Here we go. All right, next slide, please. We loved it, but we will have to watch it again. But I think that was a great kind of I guess, tale of our story and how we got to the point where we are. So we had some great work that was done through PA4V, and some, a lot of relationships that were established, and also really great work that came of that. So, but what we really wanted to see was, how do we expand our vision, and how do we be more inclusive to include not just parents and pediatricians, but also the wider community, including, community members, other healthcare workers, also educators, or, residents, for example. So, so our mission for Ohio Champions for Vaccine is that we are a coalition of passionate individuals dedicated to improving vaccination rates for all Ohioans through education, advocacy, and statewide partnerships. With that, we have guiding principles. The first is we believe in science and the overwhelming evidence that vaccines are safe and effective. We believe that when Ohioans immunize, we demonstrate our values of working together and looking out for one another, especially those who are the most vulnerable. We also believe that healthcare providers are sharing evidence-based information with their patients. So those are our overarching principles and our mission. Next slide, please. So as you can see, we also have a purpose. So our main purpose is to collaborate with medical and public health groups, parents, and other invested stakeholders to reduce barriers to vaccines, to distribute accurate, science-based immunization information, and encourage evidence-based vaccine policy. Our main goals are being a respected voice for accurate immunization information, educating about the importance of staying up to date on all recommended vaccines, providing resources for healthcare providers and other immunization advocates to help address vaccine hesitancy, which is such an important issue right now. Advocating for science-based immunization policy in Ohio, including the elimination of all non-medical school vaccine exemptions. Sharing how our Ohio values include doing our part to protect our communities, and especially the medically vulnerable, through herd immunity. Next slide, please. So part of the coalition membership will be, please encourage all of you to join, is that we are inclusive to all individuals, agencies, and organizations, which is the mission of our coalition, not just parents or healthcare professionals. Our asks for now, and I'll go into some more specific asks later on, was to complete the Ohio Champions for Vaccines pledge at ohioaap.org. You can see the website there, and hopefully we'll include the link in the comments. To send pro-vaccine messaging to our legislators through Voter Voice. Voter Voice is a unique platform that allows us to send communication to our legislators in a pretty easy way, so that you're not having to generate any of the verbiage on your own. You can essentially just click and resend. So it takes a lot of the time component out. So if people feel like they're inexperienced or have never done that before, it kind of puts it a very easy, user-friendly way to do so. It allows you to, or we're asking to disseminate relevant information to organizational members, employees, and or personal contacts through listservs, websites, social media accounts, and newsletters, and be really a positive source of information for vaccines versus so much of the anti-vaccine sentiment that we sometimes see on social media. We're hoping to keep the coalition informed of our organizational related activities, and inform Ohio Champions for Vaccines when any of our members create relevant social media content, blog posts, and try to amplify our messaging when it's aligning with our organization and our agency goals. Next slide, please. So we're hoping, and this is something we're in the process of working on right now, is developing our steering committee, which is currently being established. And you can see the members that we're looking for listed there, but hopefully we'll try to make this, more of a group that can envision and help driving this forward and sharing our message, and help us more expand as time moves on. Next page, please. Okay, so this is our recent work. And so through the pandemic, we've done a lot of work towards, helping kids get caught up on immunizations, as we saw that the immunization rates for routine vaccination had dropped off pretty significantly during the pandemic for obvious reasons. But, we send monthly messaging with email templates. We also utilize the Voter Voice, which you had just heard about, and, stay tuned for some information about a new grant that's going to continue the support for this.
We also did a webinar back in July about preparing for back to school and flu season. And as well as 2 different podcasts, one about boosting pediatric immunization rates last fall, as well as vaccine hesitancy, COVID-19 and underrepresented minorities this past February. Next slide, please. So, and this kind of more so, is there any evidence to support what we're doing? I think this was a really interesting article that I had found. This was in Pediatrics of May of 2020. It was entitled "A Call to Action, Strengthening Vaccine Confidence in the United States." And I'll tell you a little bit more about what the article included. So next slide, please. So within this article was some information about something called Vaccine with Confidence. And so, this had come to mind. We had a recent phone call with the president of the national AAP, Lee Beers, who had said that they were working on a national level to create more momentum about, positive stories of vaccinations, and really where people could go for information that is more evidence-based and also truthful information versus pointing either lay people or medical folks towards information that may not have the same strength of evidence. So this is CDC's strategic framework to strengthen vaccine confidence and prevent outbreaks of vaccine preventable diseases in the United States. It has 3 key priorities. One is protecting communities. The second is empowering families. And the last is stopping myths. And you can see the link there at the bottom of the page that kind of tells you more information about this, but I'll go through in a little bit more information in the next slide. So next slide, please. So this is one of the charts on the that was included in the article. And if you could advance the slide for the animation, please. So these are some of the things that I actually had identified that we're already doing with some of the work we're doing, and hopefully continuing moving forward, we will continue to do so. But in the priority area of protecting communities, we're helping organizations with targeted and culturally sensitive approaches to increasing coverage in under-vaccinated communities. So, it's one thing that tells us we're in the right path, we're getting the right information out to the people that we want. And this aligns nicely with some of the national priorities, both with the CDC and the AAP. And you can see some of the other bullet points there. So building frontline immunization programs to respond to vaccine hesitancy through technical assistance. A lot of these things that I feel like in the primary care community, we would love to see moving forward. So I hope that we can be another voice to help extend these efforts in our own state and communities. So next slide, please. So the other 2 areas are the empowering families and then stopping myths. And again, if you can do the 2 other animations, please. So one that I felt like we're already working on is reducing hesitancy and improving vaccine access at the nation's community health centers through developing of culturally competent patient engagement strategies. Please see in some information coming out through the OC for V email that, and especially to those that take the pledge, about some certain targeting materials that we have for minority populations regarding the COVID vaccination. And I'm sure you've seen some of the TV ads and social media ads trying to target those populations as well that have notoriously had increased vaccine hesitancy. The second animation there points to educating our state policymakers on vaccine safety and effectiveness. And Danny spoke really eloquently about this earlier, is that this is one of our biggest priorities. I think one of those things that's ultimately in our wheelhouse and is our kind of call to action to really educate those that may not have that information, and also something that really will help, ultimately in improving the health of our children and families in the state. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's some exciting developments that we look forward to moving on, is that we are having an updated website. So thanks to all the staffers for Ohio AAP, we have a very beautiful and new streamlined looking website that includes our new logo. So if you have some time this afternoon, go check out ohioaap.org/OC4V. Included on there is some useful information. One that I really like to point families towards is the Fast Vax app. Facts. That's a tongue twister if there ever was. But it gives useful information you can point parents to, and it also has information specifically for physicians regarding useful and truthful information about vaccines, as well as different additives. If you have people that ask, oh, is this included in this vaccine? It's actually a place where you can point families towards to read more about that. Our second bullet point is that we do have some new grant funding from Merck that we just heard about this week. It's a $10,000 grant that will continue support of Voter Voice, which is that neat way of sending information to our legislators with just kind of ease of use for our users. So that's exciting that we'll have continued use of that moving forward, and hopefully we'll expand our voice. We also will use that grant to help us with recruitment for our steering committee and other initiatives as far as advocacy towards immunization. Our last bullet point is, that we have had our partners in Pennsylvania have reached out to us with interest in joining forces on different initiatives towards pediatric health and immunizations in particular. So we're excited that moving forward that we can have them lend a hand for stronger voices, and also lend a hand if anything comes up in their state that we can be useful with. So next slide, please. So this is actually kind of our ask of you moving forward. So this graphic shows our 5-day advocacy challenge. So first and foremost, we want you guys to go on the OC4V website or on social media, either Facebook or Twitter, and take the OC4V pledge. And that pledge is just saying that you commit to say the same goals and priorities that the OC4V stands for, and that you're willing to take part in any kind of small efforts of advocacy that we can do on an individual level to really promote positive momentum towards vaccinations, and also just lending more information that is actually accurate and truthful versus any kind of other not truthful or myth messaging that can be out there. So that's our first ask. Now, these are divided into 5 individual days, and our start day is going to be this Monday of this following week. So stay tuned. We'll put reminders on social media to encourage you to do these each day of next week. So again, the first one is to take the OC4V pledge. The second day is going to be more individually focused. So making sure that you and your family is up to date on vaccinations. So, most importantly, as of now, is COVID vaccination, but also, if, any family members may be behind on anything, or if there's new babies coming in, making sure people have Tdap vaccinations, et cetera. Day number 3 is going to be to recruit 5 new OC4V members. So, that can be friends, family members, other pediatricians or medical professionals that you work closely with. Day 4 is going to be to post on social media your opposition to House Bill 248. So Danny had gone into some more details about that, but obviously that's going to be one of our biggest missions moving forward, is to oppose the House Bill 248 to try to continue to kind of lessen the loose immunization laws in our state. And then day 5 is going to be to reach out to your legislators on your opposition to House Bill 248, and we'll hopefully be sending out some voter voice messaging to you to help you do so. So those are that's our 5-day advocacy challenge that will start again this coming Monday. So stay tuned, keep a close eye on social media for more information, but hopefully should not be such a heavy lift and help us kind of get our feet wet in launching this new initiative. Next slide, please. All right, so I know, we're getting close to our time here, so I don't want to overstep my bounds, but I did want to thank everybody for allowing me to give you a little insight on our new launch. I also want to thank our staff members, specifically Lori, who was a huge help in kind of redefining this, coming up with, our vision, our mission, and also kind of helping with the grant funding and establishing relationship building. So I really appreciate everyone's time. Back to Chris.
Thanks, Denise, and the board and all the membership, especially want to thank you for your leadership, not only for the old parent group, but now sort of launching into this more inclusive group. So again, check your emails, check our social media, check our Twitter page, and look forward to seeing all of you sort of flooding social media with the message of why it's important to vaccinate our kids in Ohio. Okay. we're in last session, little bit less formal session. Was really meant to be a fun and interactive brainstorming session with our amazing facilitator, Angela Kreil. Many of you that have been to our meetings, both in person and on the web, know Ange. She is president and CEO of Kreil Communications and has been full of ideas since she was a child. Some amazing, some ridiculous. But today, as a grown-up professional, she's able to take a little amazing and a little ridiculous and a whole lot of strategy to develop creative yet practical communication ideas that get results. Ange has more than 20 years of experience in helping to develop and implement strategic communications efforts for organizations that range from small nonprofit organizations to large international corporations. And, you know, over the last decade, you know, the chapter has reached many highs and many successes. And that partnership with Kreil Communication has been one of the main reasons that we've been able to be as successful as a chapter and sort of positively affecting children's health that we have. So, I'm mostly going to turn it over to Ange. I'm going to also be her co-pilot. And really, we want to focus on some strategies and some ideas as we start to plan for our Safely Back Together annual meeting at the end of October, on October 29th and 30th. Ange, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. So this is going to be a little challenging. It's the first time that I've facilitated a brainstorm session that is 135 people strong. So this will be fun. We really want to hear from you and what you want from the chapter, particularly related to the annual meeting. Because the chapter has grown in its sort of depth and breadth over the last couple of years, we thought it might be helpful for you to see the meeting topics that we have had over the last couple of years. And so we put together a slide that lists out some of the main topics of the annual meeting, which I think Alex is going to share with you all here shortly. But what I want you to think about while we're waiting on that to pop up is if you were a magical wizard, right? And you could wave your magic wand and you could come up with, and you could make yourself an expert on any pediatric topic out there. And I'm talking anything. I mean, from being like, you know, a super popular pediatrician on social media to being able to be an absolute whiz when a child comes into your office with a really complex mental health problem. What would that topic be? What is it that you would love to be able to wave your magic wand and become the know-it-all expert about, that you aren't already a know-it-all expert about? And we're going to talk a little bit about that. So think about that. And while you're thinking, take a look at your screen, because what is up there are the last 5 years of Ohio AAP annual meetings. You know, last year's was very much focused, of course, around COVID impacts, and then the Store It Safe suicide prevention program that you heard about earlier from Dr. Gittleman and Dr. Denny. And then in 2019, we talked a lot about advocacy. We talked a lot about adolescent and trauma-informed care, and then we did have quite a bit on lead. Prior to that, we've addressed everything. There's a lot here on adolescence. Obviously, that is a challenging time for parents, and that's a challenging time for pediatricians. And so you'll see that several times on here. There's also some of the things around opioids. We've had a lot of conversation around advocacy efforts, everything from coding to scope of practice issues to managed care, you know, all and everything in between. And then, you know, we kind of, sort of comes full circle. In 2016, we were talking about the Sandy Hook Promise Partnership and mental health issues with children and gun violence and bullying. So you can see kind of themes and threads of things through here. We would like to hear from you now. What, if you have that magic wand, what would you want to cover in our next annual meeting? It can be a small topic, it can be a big topic. You can chat it if you'd prefer. And thank you. We've already had a couple people starting to chat. And I think Dr. Peltier, you're gonna make sure we're capture or at least acknowledging those as those come in.
Yep.
And then if you'd
Just
like
keep
to,
them coming, and we're
yeah,
gonna
keep 'em coming.
Liz will get this chat down.
Yeah, and then if you'd like to unmute yourself, feel free to chime in. We've got perinatal mental health, everyone in the family, whole health, autism, ACEs. Oh my goodness, keep them coming. This is amazing, you guys. Awesome.
So, when we talk about ACEs and trauma-informed care, we are lucky to have two of the leading national experts that have been very involved in the chapter. One was on this call earlier, Dr. Jim Duffy, as well as our former past president, Andy Garner. I've seen LGBTQ issues, which I think is, Danny mentioned, is very timely and pertinent and really ties in with mental health. We're seeing more mental health things, Ange.
Reproductive health, sexual abuse, trauma. Yeah, bipolar. This is amazing. Please keep these coming. We want to hear what you have to say. Race and police, mental wellness, resiliency. I love that word. It is such a positive word to use when describing children. Actually, our local school district just created a new mission statement and used the word resiliency in there to describe the kinds of adults they want to create as a school district, which I thought was fantastic. Health equity, fertility issues, gender issues. Oh, here we go. Value-based payment changes from insurance companies. We definitely need some of that payment and coding and practice of pediatric stuff in there too. So thank you for chiming in. Anyone want to share verbally what they're thinking? We're happy to hear your voices. Everybody's quiet.
Can I ask for a clarification? So Alice, you had put engaging assessment skill. You can either, if you wouldn't mind unmuting, or if you want to type in the chat box. I'm not sure what you mean by that, but I'm curious. I'm intrigued by that. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you meant with that?
Sorry, trying to unmute.
You're fine. Welcome.
Hi, I'm always looking for something that gives me more information, something that triggers that patient to share a little more.
Okay. Great.
Oh,
thank
so
you.
like create, like almost like interviewing skills, like how
Interviewing skills, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
And Dr. Chamberlain had put in motivational interviewing in there, so that kind of goes along with that. So, I think we're definitely starting to see some buckets, some trends that I think we put some of these into. And the child health pillar, this is really key for us. We're actually, we're wanting you to do our work for us, but no, really, I mean, we want our meeting to meet our members. So we're going to be meeting in a couple of weeks. And so this is exactly what we want to hear from our members.
Yeah, motivational interviewing's been on there a couple of times. That's really great. I know, Dr. Peltier, we did a session on just sort of that the fatigue of compassion that we sometimes get, and I think some scripting and some things like that people can use to get more out of their patients when they're trying to draw that information out is a really good companion piece to that.
So Jason, I'm assuming you meant navigating the 21st Century Cures Act, not the CARES Act. I always get those two mixed up. And I will tell you that is something that I definitely, we talked about. If we don't cover it at an annual meeting, we definitely have talked about, we did a webinar with Andy Spooner when it kind of first around the time it was coming in, but I definitely want to do another, at least a webinar, if not something at an annual meeting on really focusing on adolescence, because I think a lot of us in practice are really sort of struggling with what this means practically and how to do it. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and one of the other things that I know we're facing a lot because I'm a neonatologist, is H&Ps of our babies and revealing maternal health care things that may be social secrets or may put the mother at harm, but we can't necessarily list as private or sensitive, and how to just navigate some of this is becoming very difficult.
No, definitely. And that's great. And I've been living with it from a primary care perspective, but that is, you're right, from that neonatology experience. And really, it's really affecting not even necessarily your patient, right? So those are definitely things that we need to address. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dr. Dritz, for the speaker recommendation. Appreciate that.
Mike, when you put social determinants of health, what are you looking more for tools to screen, resources for when we have families that are affected by social determinants of health?
Yes.
Okay.
So
all of the above,
the whole gamut. So
Okay.
screening families, how do we deal with positive screens when we get them, how it can affect both the child and the family's health. How can we screen and help our families?
Great, thank you. That's helpful.
I think this is great. If I know that people have put ideas in here, if you have other ideas, please keep them coming in the chat for the next couple of minutes. And if you go, I always have the, I go home and I relax and I get work off my mind, and then work comes flying back into my mind with a great idea. So if you have the work coming flying back into your mind tonight or over the weekend, please feel free to email the chapter, email one of the members of the chapter board, give them a call on Monday, and we would be really happy to hear additional ideas that you might have for topics for the annual meeting, or even for breakout meetings like this one that we have in the fall, or in the spring and in the winter. That would be a little bit more succinct type meetings. We'd be happy to take a look at these ideas and incorporate them, because we're here to serve you.
And as we hopefully move away from having to do a lot of podcasts and webinars on COVID, hopefully, these are other topics that we could do also, so not only is this really a planning meeting for our annual meeting, but it really sort of, I think, helps sort of set the menu for the upcoming year for the chapter's educational offerings.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Dr. Peltier. I'm going to turn it back over to you to wrap us up.
Great, thank you. Are there any more slides? I'm not sure if Alex, there are any more slides for this. If not, I'll kind of, nope, exactly. So in about 10 minutes or so, you will receive a follow-up email from the chapter that will have links for you to claim your evaluation, your CME, your MOC Part 2. And then again, a little bit later, probably later next week, you will follow up with the slides, as well as a sort of a follow-up question and answer for some of the questions that we did not get to be able to answer. I just really want to thank everybody for taking the day to spend with us as we sort of really focus on some of these issues. Many thanks to all of our speakers and our experts that joined us. Before we go, I just kind of want to wrap up. During some of the breaks, you were seeing many of the programs, but I just wanted to highlight a few of those. As most of you know, the chapter runs several quality improvement programs that offer free maintenance and certification Part 4 credit. They are led by chapter members, and they are available in several formats to meet the various needs of our providers. So there's collaborations, there's practice coaching, there's on-demand learning. Again, the annual meeting will be coming up, and again, whether it's in person 100% or a hybrid or completely virtual, whatever it may be, we are committed to making that free for all of our members. So you will be able to join us to be safely together again in 2021 at the Hilton Polaris Columbus, October 29th to 30th. We're hoping that registration will be open in about a month. We're going to take all of this information that you all just provided to us and sort of come up with topics and hopefully a very powerful agenda. A couple of weeks from now, many of us will get together for Goofy Golf, a fun, safe outdoor activity. Let me talk about the QI in education for a second. I skipped ahead there. So we have the ohioaap.org Pediatric Education Center, which has recently been revamped. It's sort of a place to go to really look at, utilize, review our database of education that's been provided by the chapters. It's been reorganized into category, author, as well as type of credit, MOC Part 2 or CME. Next slide. Now we'll get to Goofy Golf. So again, May 14th, please join us. For those of you that are able to make it in person, it should be a lot of fun. There's going to be some food, there's going to be some beverages, there's going to be a lot of fun. But most importantly, we're hoping to raise money. Really trying to finish up funding the Put a Lid on It program. So if you are unable to join, please go to the website, consider buying some raffle tickets or donating, whatever you feel comfortable and able to do. Next slide. So again, just more information on how you can help. Again, $5 purchases a helmet for every Ohio child. So please help us reach our goal for that. My practice, we're doing it for the first time. It's the 10th anniversary. We're very excited. We're going to have on Sunday, May 16th, we're going to do a little bike helmet education event community-wide at our local park. We're very excited. Next slide. If you're not a member of the Ohio AAP, why not? What's holding you back? Please consider joining. For those of you that may be national AAP members, you do not automatically, by paying your national dues, you are not automatically a member of the Ohio chapter. You have to check that box separately. It is a separate membership fee, but hopefully you will see that it's a very reasonable fee, and you've seen all of the programs and education and advocacy that the chapter does, and hopefully we've shown you that it's very worthwhile. So please go to our website, ohioaap.org, and go to the membership page for that. Next slide. So, again, I want to thank all of our speakers. I want to thank all of you for participating. We will hopefully get to see many of you at our next time where we get together for education, be it virtual or in person, who knows, but sort of save the date. July 30th is going to be our annual summer retreat. For our executive committee, we hope to see many of you hopefully in person, if not at least virtually. And again, please remember next week that each day the social media challenge for the new champions for vaccines. So looking forward to seeing all of you in the near future. Stay safe, have a great weekend, and thanks everybody.